The skill Summoning the Ancients allows you to summon creatures that lived about 4,000 years ago. These lands are called Tenma, and it was in this place that such a useless skill was awakened. But with the help of this unusual power, the young man can bring an ancient civilization back to life. An incredibly large dragon of fabulous purple color flies high above him. After a while, the guy ended up in the royal capital of Gethel. He clearly didn't expect to see one thing. He seemed numb with surprise and fear. The guy saw an announcement that he, Diluc Rabilo, should be sent to the borderlands of Tenma. The guy even dropped his things from his hands. He couldn't understand why he was chosen. Diluc tried to enter the castle, but as it turned out, the king ordered not to let this guy in. The guard was forced to tell the young man about it. The man did not let the guy through, as he was told by an order from above. Then the guard said that Diluc was really a loyal assistant, trusted by King Goth. The man himself was surprised that the guy was being expelled. After all, he doesn't know anything himself. The guard understands that everyone knows that the policy proposed by the guy has made the country richer. A man can't even understand what the king is really thinking. Diluc realized that something incomprehensible was definitely happening here. Diluc Rabilo was born into a rural family of account. His family protects people and serves the king. Diluc's brothers got great skills, and Diluc himself got a strange, in his opinion, skill summoning the ancients. No matter how hard the guy tried, he couldn't activate it in any way. It seemed that all the work was going down the drain and it was not worth trying at all. However, he did not give up so easily. On the contrary, the guy began to study even harder. The main character successfully passed the exams and proudly became the king's assistant. That's how he started working in the castle and joined the king's entourage, faithfully serving. Diluc was extremely happy to serve the king and help people, but he still found himself in such a situation. It would seem that nothing foreshadowed trouble, but fate decided otherwise. No one in their life wants such an outcome of events. The young man started, as if he had just been torn out of his thoughts, and slowly turned around to meet the gaze of the newcomer. His face, which had previously been frozen in deep thought, now tightened as if he was preparing for trouble. However, the guy, Acto, did not hide his dislike, considered that such a face was still great for Diluc, as well as his skill summoning the ancients. He was clearly not happy about the appearance of the latter. Acto grabbed him by the collar of his t-shirt and approached him. The guy said that Diluc is not a very good person. He was annoyed that for some reason the hero was appreciated more than him, and he also managed to become the king's confidant. The blonde did not think that the king would expel Diluc so quickly. The guy was thinking about what Acto meant. Then Diluc realized that Acto was involved in his exile. Diluc was filled with a feeling of anger. It was hard to imagine how much rage had appeared in such a short period of time. Acto said that he was just doing his job. He could not even imagine that an official like a guy would try to sweep the country for himself. This can be a problem. Diluc guessed that Acto had set up everything. The guy grinned and said that the punishment was very lenient, because the king simply sent Diluc away, although he could have made a more serious and cruel sentence. Acto asked the guy to get lost, calling him a bad person. He proudly turned away from the guy he had left sitting on the ground in front of the castle gate, which Diluc was never allowed into. The guy asked me to take care of the country and not use it for selfish purposes. Unfortunately, this is all that Diluc can do for the country at the moment. Acto spitefully said that he should say this in his village. He considers Diluc worthless, and with such a skill he cannot be trusted with responsible work. Diluc understood this himself, but he still tried to do his job and work for the benefit of the country's population. Diluc went to the village. He wonders how it all came to this. The coachman announced that they would soon arrive in Tenma. The man's voice distracted him from his corrosive thoughts and forced him back to reality. The guy had heard that there were many races living in the borderlands of Tenma, and the government had no special power. He also heard that the previous lord of the lands had escaped. It didn't give me confidence. The main character also apologized for having to be led so far. The coachman says that it is not worth saying an apology. The village will be visible soon. They arrived at the place. The coachman asked if he needed help with his things, to which Diluc said that he should first ask about the mansion. He looks at the picture in front of his eyes in shock. The windows did not let in light, and the doors creaking on their hinges made sounds that only increased the feeling of longing. Diluc noticed that the village looked more like ruins. He knocked on the door and asked if people really lived here. He went to the residence and said that he had been sent here as a lord. The young man was met by a young girl who was looking after a little girl. She clearly did not expect to see a guest in her house, especially one who would turn out to be the new lord. The guy asked the girl where he could find the mansion. The girl, thinking, remembered where the previous lord lived. It seems that it was a long time ago because she did not immediately remember where to find this place and settle the Lord. She led him to a dilapidated house that didn't even have windows. The boards, which it is not clear how and still held, hung from the roof. The walls of the house themselves were full of holes and crevices. She realizes that the house looks bad and told the guy about it. But Diluc did not show that he was dissatisfied with anything. After all, the house looked no worse than the rest of the houses in the village that people are forced to live in. The girl said that she needed to go to the mountains now in order to get food. The guy was surprised because it would soon be night. He was struck by the girl's intention to go to a dangerous place at such a late hour. The girl explains that there is no food in their fields, so she has to go to the mountains to feed her younger sister. She says that she can share the food with the Lord if he so wishes. Diluc is trying to figure out what kind of village this is, where small children are starving at such a time. Where he came from, there are no such problems with food, shelter, and land. So the Lord was still trying to understand what was happening. Diluc could not understand where such a place like this came from in the country. He expressed a desire to go to the mountains instead of the girl. He simply couldn't allow a young girl to put herself in danger. The guy asked not to worry about him because he was just going to look around. Instead, he asked the girl to help the coachman sort out his things. The girl sincerely thanked the guy. He asked her again not to worry. Diluc went to the forest. Rocks were scattered all over the road. The roots of the trees peeking out of the ground created a kind of strained labyrinth, forcing Diluc to carefully monitor his every move so as not to stumble. The forest seemed very creepy. There were nasty miasma everywhere in the forest. Miasma is the air containing a magical essence. A very terrible thing that attracts monsters. The guy realizes that his skill summoning the ancients is absolutely useless here. He is proficient in fencing and has knowledge. He just needs to pull himself together. As soon as Diluc thought about it, he heard a scream full of horror. It turned out that the monster wanted to attack a woman with a child and an old man. Helpless residents are not at all able to fight back against a monster that is several times larger. Diluc is going to apply Robolow's style. With his skill of cutting the starry shadow, he hit the monster with one blow and made people safe. The woman and the man were surprised that they were saved by a guy. They no longer hoped for salvation. Ordinary residents were amazed that such a skilled swordsman was in such lands. The man even thought that he was in a dream. Diluc was embarrassed because he hadn't done anything serious. It seemed to him that such things should be done by anyone who is able to somehow protect those who are weaker than him. The monster was already disappearing into thin air. The guy thought that the monster was weak, and it went to his advantage. Thanks to his skills, he was able to quickly and deftly finish it off with the least cost. Immediately, a growl sounded next to the guy. The guy looked up and saw something terrible. In front of him was a huge monster that seemed to be able to reach the clouds with its head. The guy shouted to the residents to get out of here immediately. The monster turned out to be a great serpent with a danger level of A. He was just an incredible size. The monster's mouth was slightly open, and it seemed that it was about to attack. The monster, surprisingly not rare, but its size and strength were alarming. As it turned out, the residents of the guy did not obey and stayed in place. Fear seemed to paralyze the bodies, and they could not move. The adults covered the child with their bodies and shouted that they were seeing such a huge snake for the first time. They had pinned their hopes on the swordsman. The snake immediately rushed at the village lord with its mouth open. He crashed into the guy with great force. And if he hadn't put the sword in front of him, then everything could have ended quite badly. The guy realized that he definitely couldn't handle it alone. No matter how hard he tries, it will still be unbearably hard for him to deal with such a monster alone. Even his swordsmanship skills would be powerless against a creature of this size. As soon as the snake struck with its tail, the guy realized that the scales of the monster are very strong. No matter how hard the guy tries, he still won't be able to break through this incredibly strong armor. Diluc urgently needs to come up with what he will do. The most important question at the moment is how the guy can save innocent residents. Diluc understands that he has no other purpose at all, otherwise his presence in this place does not matter at all. The guy rushed at the snake, swinging his sword. Diluc remembers Acto's proud face and realizes that he wants to look at it again. But beyond that, Diluc wants to save these people. He stopped the huge snake with the blade of his sword. He had the courage to prevent the monster from attacking. The guy understands perfectly well that he has nothing but this useless skill, but he still has to at least protect them. After the snake brushed the swordsman's tail again, the swordsman realized that right now he could activate the summoning of the ancient skill. In such a case, it is important to seize the moment and act quickly. He was just shocked that he could activate his skill. Diluc did not understand why the opportunity appeared at such a moment, because it was so inconvenient. To activate, you had to spend points from the vault. The guy couldn't figure out what all this could mean. The snake began to approach the guy. The slow approach of the monster did not bode well. As he approached, he pulled out his long tongue and prepared to attack with each thrust forward. Diluc realized that he did not have time to think at all. The guy tightened his grip on the sword hilt and activated the skill. He couldn't immediately make out what was going on because he needed to act urgently. The main character is trying to catch his breath. Everywhere the space was shrouded in smoke. The snake began to hiss. He clearly saw something that could pose a danger to him. Diluc raised his head up to see what was really going on. Instead of the full picture, he saw only fragments of a huge creature. The incredibly large tail, wings and neck amazed everyone who was there. It was hard not to notice how huge and majestic the spirit appeared. Without a doubt, it was he who inspired fear in the great serpent. The huge dragon turned to Diluc and asked what he should do in such a situation. The dragon was so big that the guy was only as tall as his leg. The white dragon was looking at him and waiting for his answer. The guy still couldn't figure out where the huge dragon came from in this place. After a moment, he realized that he had been called Master. The dragon confirmed the guesses, calling him by his full name. Diluc was surprised that the dragon appeared in front of him. Residents were completely speechless from what they saw. The guy was quite a bit embarrassed that he was able to summon such a spirit who, despite his expulsion from the royal entourage, treated him with such respect. The dragon said that there was nothing to worry about anymore. The dragon understands that the guy could single-handedly defeat such a weak monster. Diluc objects and says that he definitely couldn't, because he doesn't know how to use magic either. The dragon explains that then you should not worry. The Diluc skill allows you to use the power of summoned creatures. Now the guy should be filled with magical power. Diluc realizes that now, like the dragon, he can use fireballs. The magical creature confirms this guess and advises you to pay attention to your weapon. Without thinking twice, Diluc exhaled on his sword, and in the blink of an eye it began to burn with a bright flame. The bright light from the sword was reflected in the guy's eyes. He was burning with the desire to protect and secure the inhabitants as well as this flame. The guy has gained incredible strength. Diluc felt a magical flow of energy permeate his essence. Just then the monster attacked him again. Now it's time to use a new power. The main character uses his usual skill of cutting the starry shadow. After the guy swung the sword and struck, the weapon immediately went out. As it turned out, there was a reason for this. Diluc was surprised that he had struck this snake with one blow. After all, the monster was just huge, and one blow was enough for him to end it once and for all and provide reliable protection and peace to the villagers. The guy didn't believe that he could really beat him. The dragon claims with a smile that this would have been the case anyway. As soon as the guy came to his senses, he immediately turned to the residents. Residents look at the guy with admiration. They address him as Mr. Swordsman and say that he is simply amazing. They compared him to God, who himself had descended to them. Diluc understands that the residents are safe. But then a small child reaches out to him. The kid smiles brightly at the guy and he smiles back. The satisfied expression on the baby's face makes sure that the dealer did the right thing. The main character asked the magic dragon for his name. The latter says that his name is Henkyou. The dragon is happy to serve him because with his sincere intentions he is able to change a lot. The dragon considers the guy his master. The guy was surprised that such a strong dragon obeys him. Henkyou realized that this was not a problem because the guy had already felt everything himself. The village lord recalls how he was able to create a fireball recently. The main character guesses that if the dragon was here because of his skill, it means that she came from the past. She confidently agrees but says that she does not know the details. She suggests that the guy look at the information about the skill. Diluc remembers that he needs to look at his status. He opens his status and sees that he has one call available, which gives him the opportunity to summon creatures that lived about 4,000 years ago. Diluc was incredibly surprised that the age of Henkyou is more than 4,000 years old. The dragon was very glad that her time had finally come. She had been waiting so long for the moment when she would be called into this world. The guy was surprised that Henkyou was waiting for him. He could not even think that the spirits of an ancient civilization were also waiting in the wings to feel involved in something again. Henkyou explained that she was waiting for a person who would have such a skill. She also said that others are waiting for them to be called into this world in the same way. It turned out that Henkyou is far from the only spirit waiting in the wings. Then, unexpectedly for the guy, Henkyou bows his head in front of him. She says that she appeared in this era and asked to be taken care of. It's a big responsibility for a guy. Diluc looked at Henkyou in amazement and agreed. Of course, he still doesn't understand a lot, and this is completely normal for the conditions under which he had to activate his skill. He still has a lot to learn. The guy now considers his skill excellent. He was encouraged to learn about the possibility of summoning spirits into his world. He's not worthless at all. He came across just a great skill. The guy likes these lands now too. 89 Meanwhile, one girl was very surprised. She is very happy that someone has finally appeared who will become her husband. After all, she has been searching for an unprecedented love beyond ancient times for a long time. Diluc nevertheless decided to take the residents to a safe place with the help of Henkyou. They finally dealt with this monster, rescued the villagers and just got food, as promised earlier. Residents thanked the guy for allowing them to fly together. The guy said that it's not worth thanking him at all. It's not at all difficult for Henkyou to take the residents with you. They were glad that their new lord was so reliable, and he could stand up for them and protect them in dangerous situations. However, Diluc believes that he did nothing of the kind. He thinks that his actions are not worth such great praise. The man admired the guy and considered him a strong man because he defeated that terrible snake with one blow. Not everyone can do this. Probably many would just run away, trying to save only themselves. The resident decided to tell everyone in the village about Diluc's feat. Henkyou supported the idea that her master's deeds would become known. After all, everyone wishes the guy only the best. Diluc did not want this at all, but he was still embarrassed by such speeches. He remembers how he was exiled, and then he became the head of the Tenma borderlands. Not only was he able to activate his skill, he also saved people. The guy admits that the victory is not only his merit. He gives thanks to the dragon who gave her strength to the guy, because without her he would not have been able to defeat the monster. Henkyou explains that Diluc can use her power. The main character still decided to check his status. He sees that his points have already accumulated, and there is an opportunity to summon another creature. Diluc will be able to summon others if he accumulates even more points. He wondered how he could do it. After all, there are still many things he needs to understand. Many aspects remained unsolved, and for the rest of his life he should learn much more about the skill. After all the guy knows now is that he can summon spirits who lived 4,000 years ago. It seems that this is a very impressive skill, but you need to use it very carefully, knowing the rules. The man, upon hearing this, explained that nothing is known about this period. A woman with a child explained that this period is called the era of a vanished civilization, and even in the capital's books there are no records about it at all. She also added that this era is also called legendary. It was funny to see that this era, about which so little is known, is highly appreciated and praised. But the guy was even more interested in it. Diluc was inspired. He wondered what the times were like back then. Who knows, but it is quite possible that there were such technologies that a modern person could not even dream of. While they were talking, Henkyou brought everyone to Tenma. Now the residents are going to walk around the village. Diluc, after landing, sincerely thanked Henkyou because she helped them a lot. The dragon, closing her eyes, explained that it was the duty of the spirits to help their master. Diluc began to worry that the residents would be afraid if they saw Henkyou. The dragon explained that this is not worth worrying about at all. As it turned out, souls that do not have a human appearance can take on a different image. In addition, glasses are not required to summon a spirit that has already been summoned once. Henkyou will immediately appear at the call of his master. Residents began to thank the guy for what he did for them today. The woman offered to help clean up the Lord's house as a sign of gratitude. The guy said that it's not worth doing this, he can handle it himself. Diluc wished that the residents would instead better share the food with others. The woman and the man turned out to have a fried snake tail, which, according to the dragon, is very tasty. The residents once again sincerely thanked the guy for his help. Diluc waved goodbye to them and wished them a good rest. He is very happy that everything turned out so well. The guy couldn't imagine what would have happened if the skill hadn't worked. The guy comes into his house. In fact, there was no bed or chair. There was nothing there but a couple of barrels, a broken table, and a couple of planks on the floor. Spending the night in such a place is problematic. The main character realizes that in comparison with the capital, this place looks pretty nondescript. However, he thinks he can get used to it. After all, he's in charge of these lands now and he's going to have to do it. First, he needs to create a storage room for water and food and hold a light. The lamp is all broken, the water barrels are no longer usable. In the end, he ended up in the north of the country. Winters are much colder here and things for daily use are not supplied here. The guy is annoyed that he will have to do quite a lot of things, and it is important to remember that managing his time is a key skill at the moment. It's worth starting with careful planning. Then Diluc suddenly remembers that he can make another call. The guy immediately introduces a strong male builder who could fix the house. He would definitely need help in this case. This decision seemed to be the right one, and the guy immediately called up his status, with which he could try to summon the spirit. As it turned out, experience points are quite enough for this case. The guy activates the ancient summoning skill. He turns to the ancient spirit and asks him to go through time and stick in front of him. Last time, because of the battle, the guy couldn't see what his skill really was. Now he has the opportunity to see this phenomenon in all its colors and understand what it is. By subjugating the ancient spirits, he can use their power. This is his worthless skill that he managed to awaken in battle today. Suddenly, an unexpected flash appears, emitting an unknown light. The guy wonders what kind of spirit he will summon this time. He is filled with interest because every call of the spirit turns out to be an unusual lottery. The flash gradually disappears and a girl appears in its place. She gets up slowly, as if waking up from a long sleep. Her silhouette is still difficult to see because of the haze and dust left after the flash. Soon, the smoke will settle after using the skill, and the guy will finally have the opportunity to see who he called this time. And so, when the smoke cleared, the girl stood up to her full height and said that she had responded to the call of her master. There was no doubt that this was indeed the spirit that Diluc had summoned with his skill. The girl curtsied and introduced herself as Cindy Keen. Cindy, dressed in a cute dress and raincoat, is very glad to meet you. The girl was full of joy. She thanks the guy with a sincere smile on her face and for calling her. Cindy has been waiting for this day for a very long time. Like Hakiryu, who was called up earlier in the battle, the girl was waiting for that very moment. The guy was a little embarrassed. Diluc gave the girl's full name and she immediately pouted. She reproached Diluc for calling her anything but cute. She asked to be called C-chan, but it is unlikely that the guy will call her that. Then Cindy apologized. In fact, she is very happy to finally meet a guy. She is ready to fulfill absolutely any request and the guy can ask for anything. Diluc felt rather awkward. After all, he really wanted to fix the house, and asking for such a girl is also not very good. He was raised like that by his parents, he just can't afford it. Cindy was pleasantly surprised that the guy was worried about her. Now she considers Diluc to be a real gentleman. She was definitely not mistaken about him. Now the girl is firmly confident in her master. And then the girl declared that she was well versed in alchemy, which the guy had never heard of. As it turned out, no one has ever done this in the modern guy's world. Seeing Diluc's amazement and the fact that he apparently does not know and has never heard of it, Cindy decides to show everything clearly. The girl summons a magic circle and uses an alchemical transformation. All the boards in the house flew in one magical stream. From the outside, it seemed that it was better not to disrupt such a flow. In a moment, all the walls were bare, the table was perfect, and everything else sparkled like new. As a result, the decoration of the house turned out to be at a high level, as if the house had only recently been built and handed over to the owner. The girl was waiting for the evaluation of her work. Diluc was in shock and couldn't even say a word in response. He asked what had just happened. The guy himself could not give a conscious answer to his question. The girl laughed quite a bit and said that using magic, Cindy had collected the trees lying nearby. Now the guy has learned the concept of alchemy, he considered it ancient magic. Cindy hesitated quite a bit when she heard about ancient magic. She considered alchemy to be the future and thought about what it was in the present era. Then Cindy reminded Diluc that now he can also use alchemy. After all, her skill has now been passed on to the guy, and this, in turn, allows you to create items on exactly the same principle. The guy invoked his status and saw that he, giving an equal amount of energy, could also create various objects. In fact, Diluc does not fully understand all the features of his skill yet. Diluc decides to try to use the ability of alchemical transformation, and a new lamp appeared right in front of the guy. It seems that he was able to figure out the workings of Cindy's skill. This can be very useful in the household. The guy couldn't believe that he had really succeeded. Cindy was glad that her master was so good at creating an item the first time. She was filled with pride for such a skilled guy. Diluc felt his magical energy become less, but this way he will be able to create many things. He feels that now he can bring even more benefits to the village. Cindy also wanted to help, and the things that were broken were immediately serviceable and ready for use. She handled them very quickly, in just a couple of moments. The guy admitted that they could use another lamp and entrusted it to Cindy. Now he can trust her as much as Hakiryu. Diluc is sure that the spirits are devoted to him. The girl got down to business, and after a couple of moments a beautiful flower-shaped lamp appeared in front of her. The ceiling was made in the form of a bud with petals, and the stem served as a support. 145 Diluc did not expect to see this lamp at all. He grabbed the girl by the shoulders and asked if she could create other magical items. It seems that a wonderful idea was born in his head that could turn the life of the village around. The girl realized that Diluc would have small problems in love affairs. They would have to overcome many difficulties along the way together. She sighed heavily, but then immediately asked me to rely on her. In an instant, Cindy created a glass in which water appears with the help of magic, and a box that can freeze food. There is no doubt that these items can be useful in the household. The guy had never seen anything like it. A similar lamp too, because in the current era there is absolutely nothing that could emit so much light. Lamps in cities can illuminate a maximum of a bed. The girl was surprised by this news. She noticed that the previous lamp did not use magic, and the lamps of her civilization were turned on only with its help. It seems that this is the most important and significant difference. Other magical items were also commonplace 4,000 years ago. We can safely say that the difference in quality was simply enormous. It could be seen by the same lamp. Diluc was very surprised at what kind of civilization there was so long ago. He realized that its inhabitants surpassed the present in everything. It would be interesting to know what led to such significant changes that led to failure. The guy understands that with such a technique it is possible to improve the lives of the inhabitants of Tenma. Moreover, with such a technique, it will be possible to recreate an ancient civilization. The very civilization about which there is absolutely no information. It takes the guy's breath away to realize that such a developed civilization, about which everyone knows so little, can be recreated. Then humanity will have the opportunity to get a lot of useful things. Cindy announced that she would do exactly as much as the guy asked. She is ready to spend her strength to help the guy, because that's why she came to this world at the request of Diluc. The girl holds a magic lamp in her hands. Its rays brightly illuminate the features of the face. The skill has chosen this particular guy, and a lot of spirits are looking forward to him. Of course, this is still far from the limit, and the guys will have a lot more new information and experience. Cindy, with her usual attentiveness and care, decides to cheer up Diluc and says that he will definitely succeed, because he still has everything ahead of him. She believes that this is just the beginning of their new path. The girl hands the lamp to Diluc. The guy was expelled and he arrived at this place. Diluc activated the skill and acquired a new target. Now it's a turning point for him. A lot depends on him now, the villagers are hoping for him and the guy must justify these hopes. The guy still decided to ask what the phrase "everything is ahead" means. Cindy was surprised that they didn't say that anymore. The girl felt rather awkward, although she just simply wanted to be on the same wavelength with the guy. Diluc smiled and said that he liked this phrase. Now he is sure that he and Cindy still have everything ahead of them. The guy now fully understood the meaning of this phrase and applied it. The guy wants to get better, revive an ancient civilization and create a new one. His desires are becoming more and more serious. Most likely, this will become his new goal. Now the guy's desire to make Tenma's people happy becomes a clear goal. He intends to improve people's lives because he now has all the opportunities to do so. Moreover, the villagers are always ready to support their lords. Diluc holds out his hand to Cindy and asks her to take care of him. The girl confidently agrees with a smile and holds out her hand in return. Now they both understand the responsibility they have placed on each other. The guys are going to walk this path together. Sydney shakes hands with the guy and says that she will always be there for him. It's about what she's been waiting for so long. This moment has finally arrived. Then the guy remembers that they need another bed. Sydney was outraged because she thought that one bed would be enough for them. Here the girl again faces the difficulty of getting closer to the guy. While they were arguing, it was already evening. Two bandits were watching the guys from the forest near the house who were clearly up to something. The appearance of bandits never bodes well. The new lord needs to be on his guard. The morning has come, the weather is just great outside. Cindy, with a frying pan in her hand, wishes good morning to Diluc. She obviously got up much earlier than the guy. The guy noticed that the girl got up quite early. Cindy explained this by saying that she tries to be useful after the draft. She really wanted to cook breakfast and wait for the guy. She even created kitchen utensils with the help of alchemy. However, they don't have any food at all. The girl was very disappointed with this because she wanted to please her master and did literally everything for this. But all she needed was some breakfast food. Cindy was upset that she couldn't create food with alchemy and she wanted to feed her master. The guy is glad that she was worried about him, but he thought that there was not such a serious reason to be upset. Diluc began to think that they should get food first. To do this, you need to look at the fields in the village. As a rule, residential settlements simply need to have fields with crops from where people could consistently receive food. Today, for breakfast, the guys have to eat the fried tail of a snake. Cindy wasn't sure if it was delicious, however they had no choice. Moreover, Henkyou used to say that it was quite tasty. The guys went to look at the fields. It took Cindy a moment to realize that this was Tenma village. Everything was in the same condition as when he arrived. The fields needed water and there were very few crops. It is clear that there are not enough workers. An old man noticed the people passing by. He called out to the Lord and sincerely thanked him for yesterday's rescue. The old man was proud that they had such a reliable and brave Lord. They were lucky to meet again today. The guy guessed that the man was working in the field today. He confirmed and said that he still decided to avoid the forest as much as possible and first take up the weeds. The old man realized that not everything can be as safe as working in the field. As it turned out, there are a lot of weeds in the field, and there are not enough workers' hands. The old man noticed that a young girl was standing next to Diluc and asked who it was. After all, the old man had not seen this girl before, and he was interested to find out where she came from. Diluc remembered that he had not introduced the girl yet. Cindy shouted forward and said that she was the future wife of the Lord. The guy refused this and explained that he had summoned her as well as the dragon. Now Cindy is his new companion. Cindy told me that her new skill is alchemy. The old man realized that nowadays there are no such skills at all. Alchemy sounds like something magical. The man is not yet aware of everything that is happening. Cindy is going to show everything clearly this time instead of explaining. She summons an alchemical machine and uses the transformation to extract a scythe. This subject will certainly be very useful in your work. The man was surprised by how quickly the girl created the tool. It took her a couple of seconds to do everything. She wants to be useful to the Lord and the people of Tenma. Cindy handed it to the man and said that she would help other people for the sake of her master's dream. The girl's intentions were visible through and through. She really sincerely wanted to help everyone in the village. The girl explained that this tool uses magic and the man needs to test it. The usage is quite simple, and it is not difficult for even a child to figure it out. The old man made a couple of movements with his scythe. He was delighted that this tool even cuts thick roots. It's the first time he's seen something like this. One could immediately understand that this would make it much easier to work in the fields. Cindy explained that if a man presses a button, the tool will become both a hoe and a plow. The man explained that such a thing could help everyone in the village. Of course, he is very glad that now the work will be easier. The guy praised Cindy. Diluc asks to do the same thing for him. He wants to give these things to the residents. The guy appreciated the girl's product. No one had any doubts that this thing would be useful. The girl confidently agrees, but in order to transform a lot of metal, there is one trick. It would seem that everything was going very smoothly, but the guys almost forgot about the most important condition of alchemical transformation. Cindy reminds us that alchemy is an equivalent exchange. Metal, which will become a rural tool, attracts magic to itself, changes, taking a specific form. The girl, snuggling closer to Diluc, explains that only magic tools made entirely are attracted to each other. It is quite understandable, and it was not difficult to figure it out for ourselves. However, the guy took all this too literally and still decided to write such a thing down in his notebook, citing a magnet and iron as an example. Diluc believes that he simply cannot miss a single important detail that can somehow help. The guy uses an alchemical transformation and creates exactly the same item. He got an absolute copy of the object that the girl created. This is not surprising because they now have the same skill. He hands it to Cindy, and she says that this item is simply magnificent. However, this subject was studying a strange sound and a magical glow around laughing. As it turned out, the guy was able to accumulate 200 points. This means that the dealer can replenish them by helping with the household. The girl was very happy for her master because he was getting closer to fulfilling his dream with every step. If the scale is completely filled, then he will be able to summon a new spirit. To do this, you need to help the villagers even more and increase the number of victories over monsters. And the summoning of a new spirit can be useful for residents. So a guy can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He was very satisfied with this arrangement of affairs because this way he could save time. Suddenly, a scream was heard from the direction of the house. All the people immediately started up and turned their heads towards the noise. No one expected to hear this in the middle of the day and even among other residential buildings. The old man pointed his finger at the house that stood nearby. He said it was from Letitia's house. The man was really scared himself. He seems to be as worried about the villagers as the Lord is. Diluc said that this is the right house and they need to make fun of it. The girl agreed with him. The guys headed there. As soon as they arrived, the front door of the house opened faintly. It felt like someone had pushed the door open weakly. A girl came out of it who could barely stand on her feet. She, with eyes full of horror, asked the gentleman to help. She said something happened to her sister. The guys looked into the house and saw how the bandits had captured Letitia's younger sister. The situation is urgent and requires urgent intervention. The guys rushed inside the house to help, but it wasn't that simple. They were horrified. Letitia said that many villagers and their parents themselves had become victims of bandits. Now she can't even imagine what would happen if her sister was also taken away. Diluc was about to pull out his sword. But suddenly one of the bandits ordered not to move, otherwise he would do something irreparable to the girl. Everyone was afraid for Rishi's life, so they were forced to do as the criminals said. An action plan was urgently needed. The little girl's eyes immediately filled with tears of fear. She looked at them all and waited for help. The guy realized that if he called Hakura, the bandits could do harm. Nothing good will come out at this rate. Diluc thinks about what to do now. He does not have enough time to quickly and most importantly correctly weigh everything because people's lives depend on further actions. Then Cindy stretches out her hand and addresses the kidnappers. She offers herself instead of a little girl. Everyone in the house was stunned by this suggestion. No one objected because they believed that the girl was saying that for a reason. The bandit did not expect such an offer. Cindy explained this by saying that she just wants to help the little girl and the village. She will not resist as long as the bandits do not touch others. The girl thinks it's a good deal. The bandit examined the girl from head to toe. He agreed to the deal and let the baby go. He clearly did not expect that they would be able to pull off such a successful at first glance deal. Diluc asked what Cindy was doing, but she just waved him off. The bandits with a sly smile said that the girl would not cry later because she surrendered to them herself. Cindy didn't say anything to that. She knew what she was getting into. She just believed that Diluc would make the right decision and find her. Cindy smiled softly and looked at Diluc. He clearly did not know what to do next. Hundreds of thoughts appeared in the guy's head about why Cindy actually did this and what her plan was. The little girl rushed to her sister. The surrounding people could not imagine how much horror this little girl had suffered while she was next to the bandits. No one knows what might have happened if the guys hadn't arrived on time. The bandits realized that they would soon heal normally. Here they hide with the help of a simple trick, and a second later they seemed to be completely gone. In their place, only haze and dust remained, which were also part of the reception with the disappearance. Letitia tearfully apologizes to the guy. After all, Cindy had to go to the bandits instead of her sister Rina. Diluc explains that this is not their fault at all. Besides, Cindy knows how to use magic, and she will definitely be able to come out in one piece. Then the guy realizes that the girl just wouldn't give up, and she definitely has a plan. Cindy can't sacrifice herself so recklessly. This gave the guy an even greater incentive to move forward in search of a girl. Meanwhile, the old man fell to the ground in fear. He could not understand how the bandits dared to do this, and believes that they have no conscience at all since they act in this way. At this time, the braid that Cindy created began to glow. The guy realized that it was a magical force. Diluc grabbed the instrument. He began to examine it and recall the process of creating the braid. The guy immediately called Hakura and asked him to go with him. The dragon had no objections. The spirit was only glad to help his master. That's why Hakura exists in this world. The girl ended up in some kind of cave. There was plenty of lighting. The other bandits were laughing among themselves. They did not expect that a young girl would be brought to them, and after learning the story that she came of her own free will, she was completely amazed. They regard Cindy as a good deal. After all, it was an easy catch. The bandits believe that the girl will bring them a lot of money. Her appearance suggests that she is most likely from a sufficient family and has valuables with her. However, the bandits who conducted the search said that there was nothing valuable in her belongings, and they obviously would not receive money. Then all the expectations of the criminals were destroyed. They wanted to get their share of the so-called campaign, but they didn't get anything. The bandit considered the girl strange, because she said that she would not resist, so even now she is sitting calmly. It seemed to him that the girl was not at all afraid, like the rest of the people in the cave. The bandit points his finger at the other victims. He explains that the girl needs to go to them. The rest of the people can't say a word out of fear. The girl felt so sorry for them that she couldn't help but sympathize with them. Cindy realized that these were the missing villagers who, like her, ended up in the cave. It is unknown how long these people stayed in such a creepy place and disgusting conditions. The bandit explains that Cindy will face the same fate as everyone else. The entrance to the cave is blocked, so no one will enter them, and you cannot dream of escaping. It would seem that everything is doomed to failure. The girl said that it was not for her to worry at all. She says that her master will definitely come here. Cindy, despite all the surrounding conditions, stubbornly believed in Diluc and that he would definitely come for her. Then one bandit seemed to get angry and ordered the girl to watch her tongue. The man is clearly not used to the fact that someone else is able to point him out. He became enraged, and then something irreversible happened. The girl did not expect such a disaster when suddenly an explosion sounded behind the bandit. It is unclear why, but this explosion made my soul feel calmer. It was all because the girl knew who was behind it. The bandit turned around and angrily asked what kind of sound it was just now. None of the criminals expected that someone would find and destroy their secret place. They were furious about it. Diluc stood nearby with a sword in his hands, shrouded in smoke and dust. The guy apologized for waiting. He was on the right path and believed in his conviction. That's why he found Cindy so soon. The bandits couldn't figure out how Diluc knew about their place. However, this no longer played any role, because now there will be a battle for the right to life of those people who ended up in the cave through the fault of criminals. Diluc explained that Cindy had told him her location by attracting magical energy. It was just a great idea to find each other if necessary. The magical objects created by Diluc and Cindy attract. Cindy praises Diluc with a smile. She believed in him. She didn't even have to explain anything to the guy to find her. She was confident that Diluc could handle it. The bandits started up and considered it a problem. One of them says not to worry. It seems that the bandits did not use all their cunning tricks and were ready to demonstrate some more tricks. Despite the fact that the guy found this place, the bandit can also use magic. It wasn't that simple. Banlet began using a skill that they assumed could help defeat the swordsman. Diluc was never embarrassed by such news and began to attack. He approached the man with lightning speed, which did not go unnoticed by the bandit. He certainly did not expect such a trick from the guy and was immediately amazed. The guy immediately used his star shadow cutting skill and defeated the first bandit. It didn't take him the slightest effort to defeat the first bandit. It was a pretty good start to the fight for the lives of Cindy and the residents. The second bandit began to wonder in horror who the guy was. At this time, Diluc was already behind him and was preparing to strike. The criminal didn't even have to guess. After a couple of moments, he personally became convinced of the guy's skill. Thus, all the bandits were hit and neutralized. Diluc sincerely thanked Cindy because it was thanks to her that the guy was able to find this place. It was just a flawless plan that, for the most part, was built on trust. After that, the hostages exclaimed joyfully because now they are saved. They couldn't even believe in such a miracle. They thought that something incredibly terrible was going to happen to their lives, but the trouble was over. The guy was surprised at how many residents were hit by bandits. It is not surprising that the village is in such a state. After all, bandits very often roam these lands in search of a catch. Diluc and Cindy quickly began to remove handcuffs from people. Thus, they again gave them the very freedom that the criminals had taken away from them. The guys couldn't imagine how much they mean to all these people right now. Diluc realizes that all the residents are now free, but suddenly noticed something strange. He went to the grate and saw something unusual. As it turned out, half people were sitting behind the iron bars, who also turned out to be victims of bandits. Diluc carefully asks the creature if he is injured. The gnome-like creature did not believe that they were being freed. He was so scared that he did not believe in his salvation. The main character said that it was true and then called everyone out. The dwarf, with tears in his eyes, began to talk about how their people had always oppressed and put no value on anything. It was obvious how lost the dwarf was when he was treated like a human being. Diluc took off the handcuffs and said that now everything is over and there is nothing to worry about. The guy again gave them peace of mind in their anxious, full of fears for the next day life. As a lord, the guy is very happy to help all living beings. The dwarf asked the guy about who he was. The guy holds out his hand to the dwarf and says that he is the lord of the village of Tenma. The dwarf was incredibly embarrassed that the man had extended his hand to him. He gladly shook it and asked for the opportunity to repay the debt to Diluc's village for saving it. No one had ever treated dwarves like that before. The guy sincerely thanked the dwarf and asked if they did not want to return to their native home. It seemed to him that after a long absence, the creatures would like to return to their native lands as soon as possible. The dwarf explains that he cannot return unless he pays off the debt. This is the essence of dwarves. His intentions are quite serious. Another creature approaches the guy and expresses a desire to also thank the guy for saving him. The guy who looks like a bear also wants to repay the rescue, but he is disappointed that people are afraid of their appearance. They are much larger than ordinary people, not to mention the fur and bear ears on their heads. But then the people who had been in the cave for a long time came up and said that all the people and creatures in the cave had become closer. So those present want to convince the rest of the residents that the creatures are not worth being afraid of at all. Diluc was very glad that everything turned out that way. He believed that the people of Tenma would be happy to see absolutely everyone. Although Diluc came to this village quite recently, he is definitely confident in his words. Everyone was very happy. Diluc suggested that everyone go to the village. Henkyou helped everyone get home. The summoned spirits and Diluc were convinced that Cindy was doing well. The girl showed just great wit and trust in the Lord. Then Letitia and Rena ran to them. They were calling for their mom and dad. A woman and a man stood in front of Letitia and Rena. They were incredibly happy to see their daughters safe and sound, after which they apologized to them. Parents hugged their children. Letitia said that all the villagers had returned. She asked Cindy how she could be thanked for such help. To which the girl explained that it was not her who needed to be thanked, but Diluc, since she herself had done nothing of the kind. The girl took Diluc's hands and said that she would never forget this feat. What does it feel like for parents who were afraid not to see their children anymore, to hug them tightly again? Diluc is also glad about what happened, because the main thing is that everything is in order now. His village is no longer in danger of being attacked by bandits and criminals. The villagers have found peace in their own home and a reliable lord, under whose protection they can sleep soundly. The main character introduced the dwarves and bears to the villagers, who came to help rebuild the village. The half-humans didn't know how humans would react to them. After all, for many years they were rejected and could not be recognized. All the villagers looked at the new guests with surprise. The dwarves and bears were afraid because they did not know how people would receive them. This is not surprising, because for so many years they were forced to cope and live in the shadows, away from human eyes. Letitia was the first to come forward to the guests. Everyone watched it in silence, no one said anything, because they were thinking about their own things. She spread her arms and sincerely thanked the dwarves and bears for supporting her parents. The girl appreciated the significant contribution of the people who found themselves in the cave. The bears were surprised that people were not afraid of them. The girl said that this was not the case at all. She believes that everyone is friends now because of their shared grief. The girl is right in some ways because the common grief has made the people of the village friendlier. The villagers gladly supported the girl's words. They added and said that they would feel much safer if the dwarves and bears stayed with them. After so many years, they finally accepted them. The dwarves and bears were touched by the people's reaction to their presence. It feels like my soul has become much warmer than before. Cindy and Diluc were also happy with everything. The dwarves approached the guy and said that the village was really good, just as Diluc had said. No one expected to see such a friendly village, but everything turned out even better than expected. In response, the guy sincerely thanked the bears and dwarves for coming to their village. He relies on the guests. After all, they promised to help with the restoration of the village. The dwarves intend to work hard because they build houses well. The bears also expressed their desire to help, and all the people in the village cheered up when they heard these words. Diluc expressed his sincere gratitude to everyone. Well, this was the first step towards the dream of a happy life in Tenma. The guy wants well-being for all the villagers and confidently goes towards this goal. The city has quite a lively and energetic atmosphere. Everyone is going about their business. Cindy and Diluc received an excellent award. Their efforts were not in vain. On top of that, they also rescued the missing villagers. Diluc suggested that the police themselves did not know what to do. Cindy noticed that the police officers were confused when they brought the bandits. The guys captured the kidnappers. Several days have passed since that moment, and to get a reward from the police, Cindy and Diluc arrived in the nearest city. The kidnappers committed many criminal acts that should be punished by law. It turned out that not only in Tenma, but also in this city, people felt relieved. The guys looked around, watched the people for a bit, and noticed how busy the city was. Cindy compared it to being in an ancient city. Diluc asked if the cities in the past did not differ from the current ones. The girl explained that in the past they were more developed. Before that, it was possible to get along only by remembering the magical objects created in alchemy. The guys admitted that the city they are in is also quite good, but the technologies of the past still do not leave anyone indifferent. Cindy hugs Diluc by the hand and says that she will consider the best city to be the one where she can walk with her master. The girl beamed all over. She thought that she and Diluc had flown to Hakuria in the city for a date. The guy dispelled all the girl's dreams and said that he had an important task for today. The guy wants to make a deal. Cindy's eyes lit up with interest. She is sure that Diluc has come up with something very interesting. She couldn't wait to find out what was waiting for them here. Diluc explained the fact that Tenma has no connections with the outside world. This greatly affects her standard of living. Fixing this aspect would help people feel better. The guy wants to try to sell things created by Cindy, and since he has also learned alchemy, he wants to sell goods in large quantities. Things will have to be of good value. If the guys can make money on this, then it will certainly help the whole village, and in this case the guys must succeed. Cindy believes in Diluc. The guys also arrived at the Maple Chamber of Commerce. According to rumors, this ward is the best in the country. Cindy and Diluc enter the store. In response to the greeting, the man who was sitting at the table said that he had not seen them before. The man asked to speak briefly. He asked why the guys had come. Diluc immediately saw what the country's main trading company looked like. He said that he wanted to sell the product. The merchant asked what kind of goods the young man had brought. And when he found out that these were everyday utensils, he said that he was not interested in junk. Most likely, he would be interested in looking at unusual goods for a good sum. Diluc put a bag of items on the table and asked to take a look first. The guy is firmly convinced that he will not be intimidated at all. And then the man drew attention to the guy and his product. The merchant noticed the pressure with which the guy was offering his product and still decided to take a look at what was offered. The guy put all the utensils in front of him. The man carefully examined the 2 glasses and the lamp with a magnifying glass. He saw that these items were quite rare. After the inspection, the merchant was ready to give his verdict. Cindy asked the merchant to touch the magic stone. The man nevertheless obeyed, but with great distrust did what the girl asked. Apparently, he felt that he was wasting his time on all sorts of junk. As soon as the finger touched the magic stone, water appeared in the glass. The merchant was incredibly surprised at how it happened. He could not have imagined that such a thing was even possible. I immediately asked the arrivals about how the water appeared in the glass by itself. The girl explained that because of the magic accumulated in the stone, water is transformed. You can create 1 glass of water per hour, moreover, it is drinkable. The instructions turned out to be terribly simple. You can remember it just like that without writing it down. Cindy walked over to the lamp and showed me how to turn it on. The lamp immediately lit up right in front of their eyes. The merchant was stunned because he had never seen such a thing. He said it was very bright. The man is going to buy all the goods from the guys. He gives 100,000 rubles for each item for a lamp and a glass, and initially wanted to give 50,000 for a glass, but then changed his mind. The guy is incredibly happy because it's even more than he imagined. Depending on the position, the amount may be equivalent to a monthly report. This is far from a small amount of money, given the current state of the village. The guy gives a thumbs up, and Cindy confidently agrees, nodding her head. She is completely satisfied that Diluc was able to come up with such a plan and make a deal with the most famous trading store in the country. The merchant is going to sign a contract as soon as possible. Twirling a fountain pen in his hand, he asks the guy's name. A man can't wait to receive such an unusual product, he can't wait to make a deal. The Lord of Tenma village remembers that he didn't even introduce himself. He gives his full name. As soon as the merchant heard the guy's last name, fear gripped his face. He definitely did not expect that he would hear this name himself. His voice trembled and he bowed his head. The merchant thought he had been very rude. He didn't know that the guy was a Diluc Robolo. He did not think that the Lord would come directly to his shop. The guy asked me not to worry so much. The main character explains that he is now just the head of a small village. After all, the guy is not currently serving the king, and his name belongs only to a skilled swordsman and the lord of the village. Diluc explained that he had a request. He needs the caravans to make their way to Tenma, and there they will make purchases directly. It would make life much easier for those who live in Tenma. People would get incredible opportunities. The merchant strained quite a bit because the village is far enough away. It will be difficult to pull this off, even though the master asks him to. No matter how much a man wants to make a deal, it will be difficult to fulfill Diluc's request. The guy understands that the location of the village is very inconvenient. You also need to take into account the costs and risks. There are all kinds of dangers on the way to the village. A merchant cannot take such risks for the sake of unusual goods. The main character decides to say one thing. He says that there are a lot of lands. If you think ahead, then trading will have many opportunities. In addition, magic items are created in Tenma, and if purchases are made directly, the merchant will not need a pass. The guy suggested that it would be beneficial for both sides. The merchant looks at the guy incredulously. He recalls the rumors that terrible things are happening there. Of course, not everyone will send their subordinates to defeat for the sake of goods. The guy provides a document that confirms that this is now over once and for all. The document turned out to be a letter of thanks from the police, which stated that the lands in the vicinity of the village were now completely safe. The merchant was surprised that the guys managed to get rid of the kidnappers. The man exhaled. He agreed to send his group to the village next time. Still, he agreed for the sake of a successful deal. The merchant holds out his hand to the guy. He will be waiting for him to return to the merchant's shop. Diluc shakes hands and says that this is a great deal. Both sides were satisfied. The merchant will get his goods and the guy will get new opportunities for Tenma. The guys went to their village. It seems that they have achieved their goal, and this means that they did not fly to the city in vain. The guy sincerely thanked the dragon. Henkyou, as always, provides incomparably assistance in moving. Diluc realized that now the village has a source of income. It will make life much easier, and he is determined to make the village a better place. Villagers, along with dwarves and bears, looked at the dragon flying through the sky. The bears were the first to meet the guy in the village. They sincerely thanked the guy for his work. The guy waved back and noticed that the guys had already built a house. He was surprised at how quickly such a house could be built. The dwarf was embarrassed and said that it was just an ordinary shack. He did not expect his work to be so highly appreciated, and he could not accept the praise so immediately. Diluc looked at the house, which was simply sparkling with novelty. He definitely wouldn't say it was an ordinary shack. There was not a single crack or hole on it, all the boards were intact. In fact, the dwarf really wanted the gentleman to be pleased and smiled back. It was the dwarves who managed to impress themselves as great craftsmen. It is quite difficult to find such professionals. The bear is determined not to lose to criminals anymore. After all, when they work, they also train. The bear took a log and began to show how they did their training. The villagers smiled and noted that the dwarves and bears are very reliable. The main character noticed that people work together with the guests. However, they said that they were simply helping. The villagers admitted that although they used to be afraid of the beast people, now they rely on them. The residents were convinced that the intentions of the dwarves and bears are absolutely sincere, and they can be trusted. The bear was touched by such words. He doesn't have enough words to thank Diluc. The lord of the village gave the bears and dwarves something they had never had. It seems that now people will rely on the new villagers. The guy thanks the bears in return. The situation in the village has revived, but the guy understands that something needs to be done with the fields. This is a very important resource that will supply the village with food and allow you to leave supplies for the cold season. Letitia meets Diluc with a jug in her hands. She smiles sweetly at him. She comes up, waters the fields with a jug, then turns around and leaves. Diluc asked her about the water, to which the girl explains that she draws water from a nearby stream. The guy was surprised that the girl was constantly running back and forth. Cindy noticed that you can't do much with a jug. The population in the village has increased, and agriculture requires a lot of water, so using a jug is ineffective. Then the guy remembers that his alchemy level has increased. Cindy is very happy that the guy can now use much more magical energy. Increasing the levels, of course, requires spending points, but now it is necessary. The lord of the village is going to try his new level in alchemy and applies the transformation. With the help of magic, something is created that could help in the household. Still, another unusual object appears from the clouds of magic dust. All the guys are looking forward to what will already happen as a result of alchemy. As it turned out, Diluc turned out to have a water channel. The guy admitted that he did well. Cindy praised him. Letitia was amazed that he was able to create even a water channel despite the fact that the ground here is unusually hard. It would be a big and very long job for people. The girl thanks the guy for the work done. However, Diluc is interested in why there is very little water from the stream. Water trickled down the canal. This is not enough to collect a jug, let alone watering crops in the fields. The guy guessed that the inhabitants used to live on water from this source. After all, there are absolutely no water sources nearby anymore. Not only is it far to go to the source, but there is also less water coming from it. Letitia explained that there used to be more water, but recently the inflow has sharply decreased. This has significantly changed the lifestyle of all residents. All the work in the fields and the household was completely difficult. The guy noted that there was much less spring water, and he needed to find out the reason. After all, there has been no change in the climate here, and the problem must be at the source. The guy began to guess that something had happened in the forest, and it would need to be checked. However, you need to remember that you need to be very careful in the forest, as monsters and other dangers may be waiting there. Diluc, along with the bears, went in search of the reason for such a small amount of water. The bear also warned the guy and asked him to be careful, because there is still a long way to go. Dangerous monsters live in these places. Perhaps they have something to do with water restriction. In any case, you need to check. The guy asks the bears to be alert and keep an eye out. The bear says that the guy must return to the village in one piece. Diluc does not understand what it is about. Of course, such anxiety was unusually pleasant. However, there were no good reasons for this. The bear says that otherwise he will not be able to look into Cindy's eyes. He remembers how the girl aggressively hinted at them protecting the guy. The girl simply cannot allow anything to happen to her master. Diluc apologized for the girl. He wants the guys to do the hard work in the study as well. The guy takes a net out of his bag, and the bears asked what it was for. Diluc began to explain that this net was made for catching wild boars. Weights made of magic stones are attached to it in the corners. This device is quite simple to manufacture and use. It will definitely be useful in various campaigns. When the prey gets into this net, the trap will close. If a person gets into the network, then you just need to touch me to get free. This is an automatic security capture network. They said it was a great idea and started installing it all faster. They were glad that their food extraction would be easier now and admired how smart the Lord was. Diluc believes that if it is possible to get at least a little food in this way, then residents will not have to go to the mountains. This way they will be able to help the residents even more. The guy and the bears began to walk on. The further they go, the more miasma spreads in the forest. The road in the forest is becoming more dangerous. They need to be extremely careful because no one knows who may meet on the way. The bear had a request to the village lord. A bear with a serious expression on his face asks the guy to provide them with a battle with monsters if it appears. In fact, it was clear that he was confident in his intentions and desires. The man admits that they are noticeably stronger than humans, but even so they were captured by bandits. At first, it may even seem that the bears were upset about this. After all, they became vulnerable with their strength anyway. In the end, the guy saved them, and the bears would really like to show him their true strength. It seems that they have just the same enormous reserve of this power, which they so want to demonstrate to the lord of the village. Diluc agreed, but as a lord, he can't stand by and watch his people put themselves in danger. He asked the bear if the lord could guide them during the battle. The bears gladly agreed. Suddenly, a monster comes out from behind. His angry growl is creepy. The guy obviously didn't expect to hear this so soon. The monster was simply huge in size. Its appearance could easily inspire fear. They immediately became alert and assumed a fighting posture. As it turned out, the enemy turned out to be Cerberus. His huge and powerful body holds a massive neck with 3 heads. The mouths were open at each head. Drool dripped almost to the ground. Diluc gave instructions to surround the monster to begin with. One bear should stay with him. Everyone immediately took up combat positions and prepared to attack. Everyone was patiently waiting for the command from Diluc. Due to the fact that Cerberus has 3 heads, he has a great view. First, you need to disorient him in close combat. Diluc immediately guessed this and began to build battle tactics in accordance with this information. The bear clenches his paw into a fist and is about to show all the bearish rage. He immediately rushes at the monster and eliminates one of the heads. It was not difficult for him to deal with this, because he had long wanted to show all his might. Diluc considered this a great way out, but you still can't lose your vigilance. The guy gives a command to one of the bears to throw a stone at the monster. The bear listened and did everything as the village lord said. As soon as the monster was partially neutralized, another bear jumped on it and struck it with a spear. He also showed all his might and strength and made the guy make sure of his loyalty and reliability. Thus, the monster was defeated. The bears think it's all thanks to the master. The lord runs to the bears and praises them with a smile, saying that they did a very good job. There is very little left to the water source. Everyone is determined to keep going in the same spirit. The guys reached the place. Diluc was amazed at the view they found. There really is a spring in the mountains. He was so big and beautiful that he was speechless at the sight of him. The water flowed down from the rocks straight into a large pond. The water was so clear that you could see the bottom of the pond. If all this water gets into the village, it would be very good. Here, it seems that the guy saw the cause of the problem, because of which the villagers were limited in water. It turned out that there is a huge stone that interferes with the flow of water. The bear decided to break this stone and asked to leave this task to him. It seemed that there was very little work to be done, but it turned out to be not so simple. As soon as the bear approached him with a shovel, the stone began to move and make strange noises. It turned out to be not a stone, but a stone golem. The monster began to gradually straighten up, and after a couple of minutes he was already standing tall in front of people and bears. The creature was so huge that they had to wring their heads to examine it. Diluc gave the command to throw large stones at him. The bears didn't understand how this could help, but they continued to do as he said anyway. Immediately, large stones were thrown at the monsters. The bear noticed that this trick didn't work, but the guy convinced everyone that everything was fine. Diluc made me believe in him with these words. The guy's actions in the past had an impact on his credibility. Diluc pulls his sword out of its scabbard, makes a big leap and applies the Robolo style. If you use that stone as a wedge, you can stop the monster. This idea is quite simple and does not require much intelligence, but the result will be excellent. You need to aim at just the same stone. The guy uses a fiery incision of the full moon, thereby depriving the monster of a leg. The golem's leg begins to part into a fine crumb so that it is impossible to see it. Large stones fell directly into the water. The guy understands that if the garbage continues to fall apart, it will fill the entire pond. Then they will not be able to free the source for the residents, as they wanted before coming to the forest. Now we urgently need to come up with another plan of action. Diluc calls the dragon to his aid. He applies the Robolo style again, and then the crushing sword skill. The guy hits the monster right in the body, and it crumbles into small stones. The stones seem to disappear into thin air, leaving nothing behind. The bears opened their mouths in surprise. They definitely did not expect to see such a force. The guy stuck the blade of the knife into the stone that was left by the monster. This stone turned out to be an energy stone that helped the golem move. The guy picked it up. The bears began to praise the Lord with a smile. Diluc in turn sincerely thanked everyone else. As a result, the golem shattered into dust and the problem of inaccessibility of the source was solved. Now residents will be able to use the water. The water should return to the village. The guys decided to return as soon as possible. They all really wanted to look at the happy faces of the residents. At this moment, the royal capital decides its business. Acto arrived to the king. The king looked at him with displeasure. Acto was also unhappy to see his majesty. The king hoped that the guy knew why he had invited him to his place. After all, it is unknown where it is customary for the king to explain the reason for such a meeting. The king wanted to talk about how the guy works. He immediately became worried because he realized that nothing good should be expected from the conversation. It seemed that thousands of thoughts had already flashed through Acto's mind about how he could get out of this. After losing his previous assistant, the king put him in this position, and what is his job? It is unacceptable for monsters to invade the castle. The guy who was being scolded silently watched and listened to what was being said to him. The knights who were trained by Diluc exterminated demons. And at that moment, he was informed that Acto was standing there absolutely motionless, while others pointed their swords at a huge monster that vaguely resembled a wolf. He is much worse than his previous assistant. The king was extremely angry and disappointed about this situation. He shouted at his assistant, hoping to convey to him all his distress. Acto's reputation in the castle couldn't be worse. Although he is the son of Duke Higgins, but such a thing is not allowed. He doesn't do any work at all, preferring booze and fun. He treats knights terribly and does not want to work for the good of the king at all. After all this, the king made a decision. He suspended Act Higgins from work for a whole month. He pronounced his sentence sitting on top of the throne in front of the guilty young man. The guy was shocked by such a long suspension and incredulously asked about the sentence period. His face was contorted with shock and despair. The king made this decision for a reason. He ordered the young man to change his attitude to work in the time allotted to him. The man on the throne looked no longer young. He had gray hair that hung down to his shoulders and a long beard that reached to his collarbones. The guy continued to bicker. Putting his hand on his heart, he tried to convince the king, saying that it was not his fault. But the king has had enough of this talk. He no longer wanted to listen to Acto's excuses at all. He stared at him steadily, and in his eyes there was only coldness towards his assistant. He said that now he had to leave the hall because it was very painful for him to look at him after everything that had happened. The guy was extremely annoyed, so much so that his face turned red. Clenching his teeth in anger, he clicked his tongue and asked for forgiveness, turned around, leaving the hall as he was asked. Once he was already on the other side of the huge door of the throne room, he was already cursing out loud, clenching his fists from inner anger and rage. The exiled man, with an angry face and emotions bubbling with indignation, quickly moved forward along the corridor, almost breaking into a run. Other workers passing by turned after him with puzzled faces. He recalled how others told him that Mr. Diluc finished his business in the morning. They asked him to fill out the document, as Mr. Diluc did. He was eavesdropping on other people's conversations about the fact that Diluc was much better than him. Diluc gets in his way all the time. Even though he has long left the palace and is far from it, he is very angry at Diluc Rabilo. Moving further and further along the dark corridor all alone, he continued to insult Diluc, saying that he should expect him. The king sighed softly, looking up. There was a huge disappointment on his face. He had heard that Acto was also a talented person, but to think that he just stole Diluc's achievements using his position, the king could not even imagine such a thing. Compared to him, Diluc was great. The king even thought that there was someone who understood him. He recalled how, sitting next to the young man on the throne, they discussed important things and he felt comfortable with him. That's why he was so surprised to hear that he was planning an uprising. This couldn't be happening. This information seemed to knock the ground out from under the monarch's feet, causing him to petrify from shock. This information was brought to him by Higgins' son, and he could not ignore such a statement from such a high-ranking person. Under the pretext of demotion, the king pushed Diluc away. But in fact, deep in his heart, he had thoughts that if the uprising had really happened, if he hadn't thought about it, everything would have been different. The old king realized that at that moment he was just scared. Sitting on his throne in proud solitude, he put his wrinkled palm to his forehead, barely touching the crown on his head. Diluc had talent, popularity, and the ability to manage people. He had everything he needed. In other words, he had all the qualities of a real ruler. And if he had rebelled, many would have recognized him. Looking at the half-full glass in his hand, the old man begged for forgiveness, calling himself a weak king. But the one to whom this apology was dedicated could not hear it in any way. He understood that expelling Diluc was his mistake and his cowardice. At the same time, in another place, it was a clear day outside and the sun was shining on the wooden roof of the house. A small child was looking at a glass of water in his hand, saying that there was a lot of water and could she really drink so much. The children's eyes were full of admiration for something so ordinary and simple. Approaching the young man, the girl, smiling brightly, thanked Diluc and he happily nodded to her. She can drink this water as much as she wants. Now they had more than enough of it. He even made a well for them. This is the first time the girl sees a well of this shape. Instead of pulling the bucket out of the pit, now you just had to press the handle, and the water began to pour directly into the container from the tap. It was all thanks to Cindy's alchemy. The guy stepped aside a little, pointing with his palm to the side. The girl who was mentioned earlier smiled contentedly and giggled. One of the villagers who were near them called Cindy, saying that he wanted to tell her about the exploits of Mr. Diluc. The girl quickly woke up and ran up to them and said that she wanted to hear it in every detail. Diluc was very amused by this. A beautiful gentle smile and half-moon eyes closed because of laughter appeared on his face. Water is essential for the life of agriculture, so this should improve the lives of people in Tenmu. He gave them what they needed so badly. And now the happy residents stood with buckets full of water talking to each other. Suddenly there were loud sounds from the skill panel, which caused the hero to start up in surprise. Cindy, coming up to him again, said that the gentleman had earned points, and it seemed that it was really so. The guy opened his skill panel to see what was going on. The table showed that he already had 1,000 points, and now he could summon another spirit. Cindy was very interested, so she asked to do it as soon as possible. The guy himself was wondering who would appear this time. He couldn't wait for this moment. He stretched out his palm and called to the ancient spirit, telling him to go through time and appear before him. A bright light illuminated his palm. He fulfilled the call of the Ancient One, and a huge cloud of dust or steam rose to the side, forming a small vortex in the middle. After scattering the dust that rose from the ground, the figure of a long-haired girl in a long floor-length dress was visible. She raised her head and her huge, beautiful eyes were visible, directed at him. Diluc opened his eyes in surprise. O was in shock because he seemed to recognize the girl in front of him. They went to the forest to find the reason for the lack of water. And there, they defeated a stone golem, which interfered with the free flow of water. So they were able to return the water to the village, and the residents began to actively use the new column. Then he was able to accumulate 1,000 points. He was wondering who he would summon this time. He couldn't wait for this moment. He held out his palm, intending to find out right now. Summoning the ancients, he saw in front of him a girl with long black hair who was sitting on the sand surrounded by smoke. She had a long dress. The hero and Cindy recognized her immediately. The girl raised her eyes from the ground up. A girl named Alice appeared in front of them. Her floor-length white dress looked like some kind of military uniform. On her belt hanging from her waist, a light fabric flowed hanging down to her knee. When she saw Diluc in front of her, she jumped slightly in surprise. The girl was shy and stammered that she was very glad to meet him. The guy was a little embarrassed by such a greeting. Clenching her fists and holding them closer to her, Alice continued to look at the guy with a strange look. It was obvious how uncomfortable she was. The guy noticed it. Holding out his hand, he said that she didn't need to be nervous at all. He introduced himself to her, saying that his name was Diluc. The girl, turning away, first said that her name was Alice, and then corrected herself by calling herself Alicia. She looked away, blushing. It seems she screwed up again. The guy held out his hand to her, apparently wanting to shake her hand. He said he was very glad to meet her. But the girl immediately jumped up and grabbed her face, covering it with her hair from embarrassment. She was making different noises. Cindy turned to Diluc and, covering her mouth with her palm, quietly told him that Alice was shy with them. And the guy himself noticed this from her behavior. But she's still a great spirit, and she's just a great cook. Listening to such flattering words addressed to her, the girl clutched her cheeks with her palms, wanting to hide how much they blushed. The guy heard about cooking and was very surprised. Clutching his chin, he thought about it and asked if she really had such a skill. The spirit, squeezing her palm, confirmed this by saying that her special skill is cooking food. At the last words, her confidence grew, and she already looked different. She no longer hid her face and was not so tight-lipped. The guy was very surprised that the spirit in front of him was a cook. As soon as Cindy remembers her food, she immediately wants to eat. She closed her eyes as if already feeling this divine taste from Alice's food. She grabbed the girl by the hand and led her forward, telling her to show them her skills. Cindy was very excited and excited. She smiled radiantly, leading her friend forward. They had kitchen utensils. Cindy created it using alchemy. Alice is free to use everything to show them her skills. The kitchen in front of her was really clean and spacious with everything you need. Alice, becoming serious, tied her hair in a ponytail so that they would not get in the way and would not get into the food. She decided to get down to business. She cut lettuce leaves very quickly and professionally with a knife. After the salad, she proceeded to chop the other ingredients until she had sliced everything. The food was warmed up and she stirred it with a small spoon. She asked Cindy to make her another pot, and she quickly fulfilled her request with the help of alchemy. The guy noticed how Alice changes when she cooks. As soon as they met, she was very shy and indecisive, but during cooking she was fast and very precise. Shyness faded into the background. Finally, everything was ready and came out pretty well. It was clear from the girl's face that she was very proud of what she had cooked. She decided to serve grilled wild boar meat, wild boar cheeks stewed in cream, wheat noodles, and chicken broth. The guy was extremely surprised by the amount of food and how delicious everything looked. However, he was still worried that she had cooked too much food for 3 people. Right in front of him was a large number of huge pots that were filled almost to the brim with food. The girl shrank and immediately began to apologize. She admitted that she got too carried away and that's why she turned out so much. The guy said there was nothing wrong with that. Everything was fine because they have a festive table right now. He looked pleased. They decided that since they had so much food, they needed to feed the villagers as well. They placed many plates with dishes on a large long table and invited the residents to their house. Everyone was happily looking at the cooked food placed right in front of them. When Diluc put down the last plate, everyone turned around with smiles in his direction. One of the villagers, who looked like a bear, put the first spoonful of food in his mouth. He and the dwarf sitting next to him were completely delighted. The guy admired how delicious it was. It was the first time he had eaten such tender meat. Cindy also said that it was very tasty. She ate the food with both cheeks and smiled contentedly. The guy who recently praised her culinary skills asked if her name was Alice. He is sure that she could open her own restaurant with such cooking skills. The girl, a little embarrassed, admitted that she really had her own dining room before, but no one doubted it. Finally, Diluc tried her cooking and immediately agreed with the others that it was very tasty. The girl was very glad that he liked it. She stood next to him, watching with interest as he ate the food she had prepared. It was the first time the guy had eaten such a dish. It was just incredible. Boar meat has a smell, so it is difficult to cook it, but if it is fresh and the blood is drained properly, it can be cooked. Thanks to the freezer created by Cindy, the vegetables remained fresh. After that, he realized that she loves cooking very much. The girl agreed with him. This is really her favorite thing. After a while, the plates were already empty, and everyone finished their meal. The guy, sitting over an empty plate, turned back to where the girl was standing and thanked Alicia for the food. The guy, clenching his fist, noticed that he seemed to have more strength after eating, and Cindy confirmed this by saying that she felt the same as him. Alicia didn't look surprised. She said it must be because of the effect of her skill. The guy realized that then, when calling a new spirit, he gets its abilities. His new skill, cooking, at level 1 appeared in the status window. This skill allows you to increase the magical power after eating the food he cooked. It also increases the resistance to magical attacks. Increasing magic power and increasing resistance to magic attacks was really an incredible skill. Her skill is creating food, which adds resistance to magical attacks. To put it more simply, if he ate the food, increased his magic attacks, and thereby increased his resistance to magic attacks. Resistance to certain magical attacks varies depending on taste. For example, spicy food increases resistance to fire, and salty food increases resistance to air. And the increase does not depend on how delicious the food turned out to be. The guy realized that in this case, it turns out that food increases magic damage and adds resistance. But the guy realizes that he will never be able to cook as delicious as Alice does. The girl, putting her hand on her heart, joyfully asked to leave the cooking of delicious food to her. If she can make him so happy, then she's only too happy to do it for him. After her words, the guy smiled and thanked Alice. He was even a little embarrassed himself. His cheeks turned red and he reached for his neck. A little later, the girl went outside. Looking around the surroundings, she had a strange feeling, as if she had moved 4,000 years ago. She decided to see what products there are in the current era. Walking a little forward from the house, she noticed something in the grass and it caught her attention. The girl seemed to be struck by a weak blow to the head, and her eyes widened. One of the plants she noticed turned out to be real rice. The girl even screamed in disbelief. Diluc, who came up behind her, asked what rice was. He was leaning his hands on his knees as if he was very tired. She was very surprised that he didn't know what rice was, so she screamed again. He looked at the grass she was pointing at and said they thought it was just a weed. She explained that it was just a wonderful product and also very tasty. She gesticulated so sharply that the hoop earrings on her ears dangled from side to side. It was as if the guy didn't believe that this herb in front of him could even be delicious. But the girl added that you can even make sake out of it. It's just a unique product. A truly versatile product. There are difficulties with agriculture in this village, so it would not be superfluous. He asked Alice if she could grow this rice, and she replied that it was possible. He's growing very well, and it seems that this place is the right land for him, so everything should work out. When the guy asked if she could tell him how to grow this rice, and the girl of course agreed to tell him this. But still the guy was a little doubtful and asked, just in case, if it was definitely possible to eat it. Maybe he'll like it if you grow him up. Although his whole face showed uncertainty in his own words. A little later, the girl was able to grow rice and was already cooking it, giving it to the hero and the villagers for trial. Diluc, the dwarf and the bear-like man were in complete admiration after tasting this cereal. After a while, Diluc and Cindy stood together, looking ahead at the field. The girl believed that Alice fit in well with the village and the hero could not argue with this. After her appearance, the food became much better and it was just an undeniable fact. He didn't know that rice was so delicious before he tasted it thanks to Alicia. Cindy knew firsthand that Alice had the most delicious food. The guy was very excited by the fact that if they could grow rice, then the food problem in this village would finally be solved so easily. Besides, the village needs more money. The dealer plans to sell more magic items in the future. Cindy asked him if he had already met with the trading company they already knew, and the hero replied that they had already met. From that moment on, he was trying to find a way to mass-produce magic items, those beautiful glasses, so he decided to consult with the dwarves. He shared the good news that a representative of a trading company would come to them today. Cindy thought this was just great news, and in that case suggested going to the workshop. They moved on to one of the houses and knocked on the door. In the large door, suitable for human height, a small one was carved from the bottom. It opened in front of the guests and a dwarf came out to them. He was very glad to see the gentleman. The main character and the girl apologized for the intrusion before entering, and the dwarf said that they shouldn't worry since they are on a break now. Surprisingly, it was a neat and tidy workshop. The girl also drew attention to this place. It caused her excitement and she clenched her fists. It turned out that the dwarves have top-level construction skills. They finished everything a few days ago, and they also prepared the magic items that Diluc asked them for. Pushing aside a piece of cloth with which the objects were covered, he showed them a lot of glasses inlaid with stones. They were exactly the same as the ones Cindy created. The girl looked at one of the glasses in her hand in surprise. Diluc also saw that there were no differences between them. Now they will certainly not have problems with trading as it was in the past. The guy wrapped his arms around a box of glasses, examining them from all sides. He said he would definitely give a reward to the dwarf for the work he had done. He was very glad that he had consulted with the dwarves and thanked him for his help. The dwarf said that it was all thanks to the fact that he allowed them to disassemble such a beautiful object, and they created a drawing so that it was possible to put it into mass production. In this case, he decided to ask the residents who would have time to help with this case. He asked the dwarf if he could lead this production, and he of course quickly agreed to do so. They actually finished something else interesting. Going to a small chest, he opened it and Diluc saw that inside it was what he asked for. Inside the small chest was a beautiful bracelet with a huge stone in the middle. When Cindy saw it, she asked in surprise what it was. It turned out that this bracelet allows you to store magical energy. It acts as a repository. He needs to put magical energy into the bracelet and store it there, and after that the magical energy in the body will eventually recover. They made it from the core of a golem that Diluc defeated not so long ago. Thanks to this thing, the hero does not need to think about wasting magical energy, and he was very happy about it. He was looking at the new thing with a smile on his face. Cindy, picking it up, also noticed how wonderful the item was. Due to the fact that he has more and more skills, he needs to use his magic more effectively, which is why he asked to make this bracelet for him. Although he asked the dwarves to help him with the production of magic items, they even managed to do that. It's just amazing. The dwarf, embarrassed, said that it was just a trifle. Looking at the bracelet in her hands with burning eyes, Cindy called the gentleman. She asked to be allowed to put this bracelet on him herself. She asked him to extend his hand to her and took Diluc's palm. When she put the bracelet on him, she looked very pleased. After a moment, the bracelet on his wrist began to shine, and the hero began to feel the magical energy being absorbed by the bracelet. The dwarf said that at the right moment, he needed to squeeze it and the energy would be released on its own. Cindy kept talking excitedly about how the bracelet looked good on him. She would like to have one for herself too. As if knowing everything in advance, the dwarf showed her another exactly the same bracelet in his hand, saying that they had made another one of the same shape. When Cindy heard about it, she was delighted. But the second bracelet was just a replica that could not store energy inside itself, but still they were very similar. The girl was very amazed. Cindy put her hand on her cheek, closed her eyes and stretched her hand forward. With a smile on her face, she asked Mr. Diluc if he could put this bracelet on her, as she had done earlier for him. But the dwarf was ahead of the hero. Without waiting for him to approach the girl, he quickly put a bracelet on her outstretched arm, asking how it fit her. The girl was upset and cried and asked to wait. She wanted Mr. Diluc to put this bracelet on her. Didn't the dwarf understand that? The latter, with his palms outstretched, was a little puzzled. He apologized for not thinking about it, but still he really suited her very well. After these words, the girl smiled again, asking if it was true. Her mood was lifted again and she was beaming. Diluc approached the dwarf and, covering his face with his palm, quietly asked him if he still had such bracelets. He also wanted to give them to Hazure and Alice. It turned out that he actually had more of them. Hearing these words, despite the fact that the hero tried to speak softly, Cindy was very upset because it turns out that she is not the only one who will wear such a bracelet. But he will feel uncomfortable if they get upset that they don't have such bracelets. After all, Mr. Diluc was such a man, which is why Cindy loves him. Sighing softly, she quickly came to her senses, no longer showing her sadness about it. In this case, the dwarf decided to adjust the dimensions to the ones they needed and later bring them to the hero himself. The latter thanked him for this. A merchant's caravan is due to arrive any minute. It's their first time coming here, so they need to come out and greet them. Cindy really wanted to go with him, so they quickly said goodbye to the dwarf and left the building. 143. It is not known how long they have been standing, but Cindy has already begun to yawn. It was only clear that the caravan was very much late. Diluc noticed it too. He was peeking at his pocket watch, which showed that it was already 4:30 p.m. Could it be that something could happen along the way? Diluc began to worry, so he decided to summon Hakura. Immediately, a huge white dragon appeared in front of him instantly. He said he needed to explore the area and she understood him. Sitting on the dragon's back, they soared up above the trees, surveying the surroundings from a height. Cindy was sitting behind Diluc, turning her head from side to side to find the cart. Suddenly, she called out to the hero, pointing to a lonely cart among the trees. He quickly jumped off the dragon, not waiting for it to land on the ground. I turned to the coachman. He asked if something had happened to them. He was scared when he saw the guy in front of him and called Mr. Diluc to tell him something, but he himself had already noticed. From the curtain on the front of the carriage, which was directly behind the driver, the tip of a sword could be seen. The sharp blade was pointed straight at the man's neck. Diluc was extremely surprised. He shouted, asking the one inside who he was, and ordered him to get out of the cart. The man inside came out as he was asked. Seeing who was in front of him, Diluc was greatly shocked. Right in front of him was an agitated Acto. He seemed to be talking like a madman about coming to see Diluc Robilo, the king's confidant. The guys were standing in front of each other. The hero pulled out his sword, pointing it towards the guy he already knew. He also took out a small blade and shouted that he had come to see Diluc Robilo. He looked like he had lost any common sense. Cindy was confused. She asked Mr. Diluc who the man in front of them was. He told her that this was King Acto Higgins's confidant. He was the one who had driven him out of the palace. He is the one who caused all this to happen, and now he is interested in what this person has forgotten in this place. The coachman said that on the way to him, this man attacked him. The guy was already getting off the wagon with his feet on the ground. It wasn't so scary anymore, as help had already arrived for him. After his words, Acto turned to him and shouted at him to shut his mouth. The coachman was greatly frightened by his anger. He fell backwards, landing on the ground and flinching. Acto came to him with a good offer in his opinion. Diluc asked, a little confused, what he wanted from him. He said that the rebel Diluc was forgiven, and he was clearly not happy about this news. There was a short silence after his words, and he repeated to him that he should return to the capital since he had been forgiven. Cindy, hearing about this, looked at the talking guy incredulously with her hand pressed to her face. Diluc himself showed no emotion and remained silent. Acto heard that he lives in a village with dirty people and animals. If he becomes his subordinate, he will live well in the capital again, and he will even allow him to participate in politics. Cindy turned to the gentleman. She called him because the guy kept silent and it was annoying. After that, he quickly gave an answer, directing his dream even closer to Acto and telling him to leave immediately. The guy clearly expected a different answer, and it was evident from his face. The hero is not going to become his pawn and follow his orders. After all, from now on he is the lord of Tenma village and he must remember this. Acto reacted angrily to these statements, or else grinned more nervously. Ardo quickly approached the merchant who was still on the ground. He grabbed him by the scarf with one hand, and with the other held the blade of his blade to his face, making a cut on his cheek. He asked the hero if he really thinks he has a choice. If he refuses him, then this merchant is finished and he must answer him quickly. At that moment, when Acto thought that he was in a better position, a huge black shadow rose in the sky directly above him, heading in his direction. The guy shuddered, feeling something strange, and asked what kind of creature it was. A voice came from above saying that she had heard everything from heaven and that she would not leave it like that. A huge creature with wings appeared from above, which grabbed the merchant by his clothes and carried him away from the confused Acto. The merchant was still scared, but he thanked her anyway, and she replied that the main thing was that he was safe. The hero smiled and thanked Hakuria for helping them in this situation. Acto stuttered and asked what kind of monster it was it a new kind of demon? Diluc replied that she was not a demon, she was his friend and appeared with the help of his skill. Acto was very amazed to hear this. He asked incredulously about the skill. He shouted that his useless skill had never worked. He is an unworthy native of a poor family. He remembered perfectly well what kind of a dealer he had been before. He silently listened to all the insults in his direction without taking his eyes off Acto. Acto threw aside his small blade and said that no matter how much Diluc called his friends, he would still remain a small figure. Acto pulled out a longer sword, pointing its tip towards the hero. He clearly intends to fight. He said that a hero can't do anything alone. Diluc agrees that maybe he relies too much on his friends. He looked back and smiled when he saw them. But still, summoning was his skill. At that moment, magic enveloped his entire body. Acto did not understand where the flame came from or what kind of magic it was. Why did it envelop Diluc's body and weapon? The hero moved forward towards Acto, swinging his sword and intending to strike first. His opponent was in complete disarray and stood in place in a stupor. Having got closer to the opponent in one jerk, the hero swung and the blade of the sword turned out to be near the neck of the opponent. He instantly let go of his sword out of fear, and it fell to the ground. Stepping back, he fell to the ground and looked up at Diluc. He couldn't believe what was happening. There was fear and panic on his face. He was breathing heavily and his face was flushed. Diluc put his open palm forward and said he would tie him up. He used the alchemical transformation skill. Many roots of nearby trees rushed towards the guy, surrounding him from all sides. He was tied up instantly with no way to get free. Soon the Higgins family will start looking for him and will come to pick him up. He turned his back on the bound man and headed for his friends. He approached the merchant and apologized to him for involving him in such a situation. But still, they should hurry to the village and the merchant fully agrees with this. He was still discouraged by what had happened, so he didn't say much. Cindy admiringly called the gentleman and said that he was very cool in this battle. She promised to be with him forever. Hearts seemed to float around her from her admiration for her master. He smiled and thanked her. He looked at the cart and saw that it seemed to be damaged. They needed to fix it and go to the city. Cindy asked to leave this task to her. She went to the cart and using her magic began to repair it. There was only one thing Diluc couldn't understand. Why did Acto end up here? He doesn't think the king would have given him time off and let him out of the palace. Therefore, this situation was a bit strange. A horse was coming straight towards them, making a loud noise. Diluc heard him and asked what that sound was. Turning around, he saw a white horse with a man in uniform at the top. A coat of arms, already familiar to him, hung from the saddle of the horse, which he immediately noticed. It was a royal horseman. He asked in shock what he was doing here. A young guy in uniform asked if this man was Mr. Diluc. The officer looked confused himself. He said that he was looking for Mr. Acto by order of the king. Diluc looked at the guy with wide eyes after his words. He pointed his finger at Higgins, who was sitting on the sidelines, and explained that he was being tied up for attacking a civilian. The officer was shocked because he had already escaped from the mansion, and then he did this. When he heard that he had escaped, the essence of what was happening began to dawn on him. The guy getting off the horse came closer to Mr. Acto. He told him that he had received orders to take him back to the capital. He also showed him a letter in which it was written that from today Acto Higgins would be removed from the post of assistant to the king. The suspension period was extended for another 2 months. The punishment itself will be handed down later. Acto was greatly shocked by the officer's words about his dismissal and punishment. He believed that his father would definitely not approve of such a thing, but it turned out that they had received the approval of Duke Higgins. He also has a written confirmation, so he asked to refrain from resisting and calmly follow him. Diluc entrusted the rest to the officer, who thanked Mr. Diluc. He went over to the bound man to pick him up. By this time, Cindy had already finished repairing the carriage and approached the hero. He thanked her and said that now they finally need to go back to the village. During their conversation with the officer, the merchant had already managed to sit on the dragon watching the others. Cindy and the hero, talking about something and smiling, were heading straight towards them. Acto, who was watching all this, shouted to Diluc asking him to wait. The officer who tried to grab him somehow was defeated because he was dodging. He shouted at the hero not to even think about the fact that this was the end, but he wasn't listening to him at all. Diluc, standing next to the dragon, stroked him with a smile and did not pay attention to him. This made him very angry. His face turned pale. In anger, he clenched his teeth and beat his hands on the ground, cursing. A month later, in the village of Tenma, the villagers went about their own business. The dwarf, coming out of his workshop, held a box in his hand and greeted the bear man. A woman with children pumped water from a pump filling their jug. Two of them looked very cheerful, watching the youngest one trying to help the adults with a set of water. Diluc and Cindy were in the room when there was a knock on their door. They asked the guest to come inside. It was the merchant Serge, who was already familiar to them from the Maple Trading Company. He wished good day to Mr. Diluc. The hero also greeted Serge and noticed that the wound on his face had already completely healed this month. Serge said it was all thanks to him. He is glad that after that incident he strengthened the security of the area. The hero was still uncomfortable with the incident and he asked for forgiveness. If he involved him in something like this again, he would be uncomfortable. Serge had good news that the magical objects in the form of glasses that he gave him were instantly sold out. Maintenance requests for magic tools are also increasing. The hero really liked this news. Serge couldn't believe that he had turned maintenance into a business. Thanks to him, they are doing great business and sales. He hopes that he will continue to cooperate with the Maple Trading Company. The merchant was about to leave and bowed goodbye, but Diluc asked him to wait. Smiling, he asked Serge if he would like to have a snack before the long drive back from the village. A little later, apologizing for the wait, a plate of food was placed on the table in front of him, from which steam was still coming from the heat. It was the first time Serge had seen such a dish and asked what it was. Diluc said it was cooked by their best cook in Tenma and pointed to Alice standing next to him. The girl, embarrassed by such words, said that this was a special pilaf. This dish of the day is made from deer meat with rice and spices. Rice for pilaf is boiled with a little water to make it lush, and freshly picked carrots have been added, which are grilled with oil. It was the first time the merchant had heard about rice, so he was surprised. Lifting his spoon, he scooped up a small amount of food and said that of course he would try it. Taking some of the contents of the plate, Serge brought the spoon to his mouth for a taste. His body was instantly struck by lightning. Shocked, looking at his plate, he shouted about how delicious it was. He wondered why this rice was so delicious. Diluc said that all the products in this dish were grown on their land. The merchant called Mr. Diluc. He was interested in rice and the whole spice dish. He asked if he could sell it to the Maple Trading Company. It was so delicious that he would have liked it for himself. The hero didn't mind at all, but in return he asked them to sell it in return, indicating the place of production. He wants to make a brand out of it. He also sat down at the table next to the merchant, and they began to actively discuss this idea. A little later, Cindy was talking to a dwarf holding documents in her hands. Three girls I already know were running around in the field harvesting crops. A little further away, a man was pouring water from a well into his bucket. Looking at all this, the merchant noticed that the village had become very lively, not like last time. This place used to look like an abandoned village. Collapsed houses and bald trees could be described as this place. He also noticed that there are many different races living in the village now. He admitted that Mr. Diluc definitely has a talent for this kind of thing. And he, looking at the situation in front of him, honestly admitted that it was not only his merit. Everyone in the village helped him. He looked ahead at the joyful residents and couldn't help but smile at what he saw. But still, for him, the development of Tenmi has only just begun. Serge can't wait to see the future of this village now either. Diluc promised that very soon he would be able to see it with his own eyes. At this time, in the neighboring town of Roses, the residents of the city went about their own business. One young guy asked another if he had heard the news about the neighboring lands. Those have recently begun to develop strongly. His interlocutor remembered that they used to have a poor land, so how did they manage to do this? That's what he was interested in. The blonde man said it was all because of their new lord. The lord will change in the city of Roses as soon as possible, and it would be good to become the same as the village of Tenmi now. Various goods were loaded into a cart with 2 horses. The merchant and Diluc were standing not far from her and talking about something. They loaded vegetables, bags of cereals, crates of glasses, and other things inside the cart. They have already accepted a new batch of goods. The merchant said that, as always, he was very grateful to Mr. Diluc. As always, he has both vegetables and an excellent reputation. He was really immensely grateful for all this. He was also very impressed by the hero's talent. Suddenly, he remembered that he had heard some rumors. He asked if they really had an expansion in their territory. Diluc confirmed that this is the case, but it happened quite recently. Thanks to the persuasions of King Ji, the territory that he ruled expanded significantly. The reason for this was that there was no one else in the district who could act as a ruler. The reason was also that Tenma village is stably regulated. The merchant was wondering where his influence had spread to. The hero was happy to say that his forest and water areas had increased right up to the town of Roses. These were indeed vast territories. After hearing about Roses, the merchant thought for a while. He scratched his chin with his fingers. Diluc immediately noticed his behavior and asked if everything was okay or if something was wrong. In fact, a few days ago, Serge overheard a very interesting conversation. Come closer to the hero and covering his face with his palm, He whispered in his ear that Acto had become the head of the city whose borders adjoined the new territory of the hero. The hero was greatly surprised by the participation in this act. His eyes widened. The merchant thinks that this is not a problem for him, but just in case he decided to warn him about it. After telling everything he knew, Serge bowed to the hero with his hand on his heart and said goodbye to him. The hero also said goodbye to him until the next meeting. As soon as the merchant left him, he clutched his chin with his fingers and thought, withdrawing into himself. Aristocrats expelled from the central part of the country are often sent to villages. Duke Higgins probably had the idea that this was an opportunity for him to change his attitude. He was remembering something that had happened some time ago. Higgins' furious face full of revenge. If he's up to something again, then Tenma village may be in danger. He decided to tell his friends about it. Upon hearing such news, Cindy screamed in surprise. She asked if Acto had really become the lord of the neighboring city of Roses. She was very eager to fight with the desire to punch him in the neck and asked for permission to do so. The hero restrained her by grabbing her shoulder. He asked Cindy to calm down because it's not that terrible. When she heard that, she was a little confused and looked at him. He took out a map and spread it out on the table. He pointed at the territories with his finger and said that the current territory adjoins Roses through the forest. But there's nothing wrong with being careful. Currently, they are guarded by a tribe of bears, but they cannot cope with the increased territory. Moreover, there are not many of them at all. Even if they are attacked, he wants to be ready for this. He thought about a trip to his new territory. While he is not in the village, he relies very much on the dwarf Devato. He wanted to say something to Cindy, but she immediately replied that she wanted to go with him. He did not argue with her and said that in that case they were heading for the forest, and she completely agreed with him. Sometime later, a very dense forest through which several people were walking forward. Cindy and Diluc looked around. The hero noticed that there were not so many miasma there, but still, for some reason, there were a whole bunch of monsters. It would be easy to hide if Acto attacked them. But just in case, he suggested setting traps in the vicinity. Bending down to the ground, the hero straightened the nets of traps and laid them on the ground. Next to him, Cindy was creating those very grids with her alchemy magic. They worked together, pulling ropes tied to a grid on nearby trees. The girl is very tired. Sitting down on the ground, she began to complain that this forest was very huge. It was simply impossible. The hero thought about the fact that this territory stretches all the way to the sea, and in this case, they will not have enough time or energy to do everything that he planned. He heard a short alert and flinched. Immediately after the sound of the alert, he opened his status to look at it. He saw that his experience points had reached 1,000 again, and he was able to accumulate them. Perhaps this is due to the success in selling magic tools and the expansion of its territory. It would be very nice to have a spirit with defensive skills and knowledge. Cindy couldn't wait for it herself. She clenched her fists and rejoiced behind him. The guy completely agreed with her. He left the girl a little behind him and walked forward, holding out his palm. He was reciting a spell, summoning an ancient spirit to pass through time and appear before him. Magic gathered around him in a whirlwind and aimed at the ground next to him when he summoned the ancients. A girl with long blonde hair suddenly appeared in the place where the whole blow fell. She was squatting with one hand on her knee and the other on the ground. She slowly raised her head and her gaze was still not clear. The hero briefly stood in a stupor looking at the girl in front of him. With his mouth wide open, he looked at the spirit dressed in a short top and trousers that looked a little like military ones. The girl had a necklace around her neck that looked a bit like a collar. The girl finally got up from the ground and looked forward at the hero. She said it was an honor for her to be called up. She introduced herself as Carrot Sandy. Having said all this, the girl smiled, and her smile was so wide that even her eyes were covered. The guy came closer to her and said that he was very pleased to meet her. He thanked her for responding to his call. He introduced himself as Diluc timidly. She decided to call him Mr. Diluc. The girl began to look around, asking what kind of place it was because she did not recognize it yet. He told her that this is the village of Tenma after 4,000 years. Carrot was surprised at the time of 4,000 years. She immediately realized that this was the future. She said with a smile that she really hoped that she could be useful to him. They shook hands. He thanked her saying that he would rely on her in the future, and it turned out to be mutual. Cindy ran up to her old friend faster, saying how long it had been since she had seen her. The girl called out to Cindy, noticing that she was, as always, full of energy. Cindy told her that she had arrived just in time. She and the hero looked at her in surprise. The guy at first did not understand what time she was talking about. After that, realization dawned on him, and he remembered what they had been doing earlier. He asked about Carrot's ability. The girl, inspired, clenched her fist, wanting to show off her ability, but before she could say anything, a growl was heard near them. Turning around, they saw at least 3 monsters ahead that looked somewhat like wolves, but their bodies were also close to human ones. They moved very strangely. The monsters stared furiously at the people coming out of the forest closer to them. Upon seeing the monsters, Diluc immediately grabbed the hilt of his sword hanging from his belt. Turning in all directions, they noticed that they were not noticeably surrounded from all sides. The guy, a little worried, thought about how many of them were around. He still did not understand what to do in this situation. Carrot called out to the hero, telling the master to entrust this task to her. She walked forward and he stayed behind, looking after her in surprise. She realized that she had definitely arrived at them on time. Picking up her hammer, which had a stone inlaid on the metal, she lightly tapped her palm with it. If these monsters were going to attack them, then they should have done it all together. After she hit her palm with it, her hammer quickly increased in size, turning from a small tool into a large weapon, more like a sledgehammer just in the shape of a hammer. She jumped forward, hitting the ground with the flat, circle-shaped end of the weapon. Instantly, some kind of circular waves began to gradually emanate from the impact site, spreading further and further into the forest. As soon as the waves began to argue, the guy looked around in surprise. He didn't understand what had just happened, so he asked Carrot about it. He turned his attention to the side and shuddered. Two of the monsters were rushing straight at them, not wanting to stop. It turned out that there were a lot more of them from all sides. At least 6 monsters were heading straight towards the 3 of them, surrounding them. The guy and Cindy looked very worried. He grabbed his sword with both hands, already thinking about starting to defend himself. One of the monsters with an outstretched tongue was already approaching them when suddenly one of his paws fell into a trap that had not been in this place before. He appeared out of nowhere. The next 3 monsters also landed with their front paws in the trap set by Sandy. None of the monsters could reach them. They were all already lying on the ground howling in pain. The guy was very impressed with her skills. He clenched his fist, shouting how amazing it was that she was able to stop everyone at once. Sandy was smiling contentedly, saying that she had done pretty well. Her ability was to create traps. With her magic, she instantly creates traps, and her little hammer helps her in this. When she creates traps, she recreates their magical structure, which she once studied. She also uses magic to block visibility so that no one will notice these very traps. The guy understood why from the very beginning he did not see anything around them, and only after the monsters got into the traps, they became noticeable. She happily said that it was a great compliment to her as a huntress that he had not noticed her trap. He won't be able to stop the trap until he fully understands its structure, which is exactly how her skill worked. The guy, excited by this wonderful skill, suddenly grabbed the girl by the palms. He was smiling brightly and his cheeks were flushed. It was just the perfect defense ability. Cindy behind them saw this scene and shuddered with jealousy. Surprised, Carrot asked him if he wanted to protect something now. Is that why he's so excited right now? The guy sighed and said that he is the lord of these lands and they are slowly developing. So it is natural that he really wants to protect them. More recently, their territories have expanded. He really wants to be ready for attacks by monsters or strangers. With a confident look, the girl told him that in that case she was perfect for the role. Cindy immediately stood between them and turned towards the hero and said that he was right. Carrot, in her opinion, was actually an amazing person. She said that in ancient times this girl built a huge castle in the village of Tenmi. It was of considerable height and with a complicated structure. All of its towers were of different shapes and were not limited to cylindrical structures. The guy asked in surprise if the castle in Tenma was really built by her. In fact, it was the first time he had heard of such a structure in this village. The girl was a little embarrassed. She held out her palms as if trying to pull away. She insisted that she hadn't actually done anything so global. Cindy noticed that she was starting to act shy, so she teased her. Carrot decided to keep up and told the hero that Cindy was a royal alchemist. She created magical items for the royal family. She said that she had even been called an alchemist from Tenma before. The guy looked in surprise at the laughing Cindy, asking if it was true. He really didn't know and only heard about it for the first time today. A little embarrassed, she said she thought it wasn't cute at all, so she didn't tell him. The ancient village of Tenma is already in the distant past. In ancient times, Tenma was under the rule of a king and people created their own culture. But still, everyone lived in peace and harmony. If we talk about the castle, then it was naturally important for the village at that time. Tenma's castle was her symbol and the center of protection. Due to the fact that he was well guarded, Tenma could develop peacefully without any obstacles to this. Upon hearing that the castle was the center of protection, the guy instantly had a great idea. The castle was built in ancient times to protect people's lives. Culture and civilization developed in this castle. He asked the girls if it was possible to reproduce the same old castle now. Cindy looked questioningly at Mr. Diluc, who at that moment withdrew into himself thinking, Tenmi village really needs defensive power right now. If they could recreate that very ancient castle, he thinks they could make Tenma even better than it is now. Thinking about this wonderful future, the guy clenched his fists tightly. He was very serious because he really wants to see that civilization with his own eyes. He reached out with his palm to the bag hanging from his belt. Taking out a map, he unfolded it in front of everyone. Carrot looked at it and asked if the area marked on it was the current Tenma. The guy confirmed it. It turns out that the area itself has not changed much since those ancient times. She took part in the construction. She said that it would be necessary to change the plan in accordance with the current situation in the village. But despite all this, she is confident that she will be able to recreate it all as it was in the old days. She looked very convincing and her words were beyond doubt. Cindy happily said that she also really wants to help her, and they can do it together. The guy, inspired by this solution to their problem, thanked them. There was no limit to his joy. While the three of them were looking at each other, he told them that in that case they needed to start building the castle immediately. At the same time, the City of Roses. The streets of this city seemed to be empty at the moment. It was too different from what it was not so long ago. These alleys used to be crowded with people. Two guys I already know met each other again. Last time they talked about a village not far from them. And now the news was that the trade in rural products had been stopped. One of them did not understand why this had suddenly happened. It turned out that this was the message from the new lord. Only merchant guilds officially recognized by the lord himself can now trade in the city. Telling this, the blonde man looked very tense and scared. The guy in the hat was full of horror. He did not understand how it happened in the end. The blonde man saw a sign nailed into the ground on the side. With horror on his face, he told his friend in the hat to pay attention to her. It said that they had a tax increase again. The disgruntled resident did not understand how much it was already possible to raise them. He was extremely dissatisfied with what was happening, so he shouted. The blonde man was shaking all over with anger. As soon as this terrible lord came to their lands, everything immediately changed for the worse. His friend, frightened, put his finger to his mouth, asking his friend to speak lower because they can hear him and then he will definitely be punished. He was worried about his friend. They didn't understand what was going on with this city. At the same time, in another place, a man in a formal suit and with long black hair entered the office. He said that information about trade rules and tax increases had been provided to residents and added that things were going well. The young gentleman at the table turned out to be Acto. He turned to the man with a terrible smile on his face. When he heard such news, he was distraught with joy. The power given to him had intoxicated him too much. Now he believed that he ruled in this city. And then he planned to become the ruler of the village of Tenma, of which Diluc was still the lord at the moment. Two already familiar guys from the bear tribe opened a large steel gate and went inside the village. They had weapons in their hands, they were spears. They informed the head of the city that they had already finished with the patrol. Smiling, Diluc thanked the men for their work. A bear with dark hair came closer to him and told him the great news that their territory had become much safer than before. It was all thanks to the huge, sturdy, high-rise stone walls. It was also due to the water channels flowing right next to the wall, preventing others from climbing it from the outside. The security measures taken by Carrot have made Tenma village much safer than before. A huge wall with a moat surrounded the entire territory of the village on each side. The girl winked at the hero, saying that with her ability it was very easy for her. Seeing the girl who came up to him from behind, the hero called out to her. Carrot's ability is to create traps. She creates traps with her magic. Carrot was a trap master and an excellent builder in ancient times. The girl was glad that very soon they would be able to start building the castle. After all, so far they had only a wall and a moat ready. Recreating the ancient Tenma castle is their current task. That building was really great, so it won't be an easy task. A man from the bear tribe said that it is extremely difficult to build alone. They also wanted to help her in this difficult matter. He looked very enthusiastic about offering his help in this work. Thinking about it, the girl scratched her chin and replied that it was really true. The more people, the better and faster the work would go. With hard work, people from the bear tribe can certainly cope with all 10%. The girl thanked them for responding to help in the reconstruction of the castle. The heroes thought for a second and went into their own thoughts. The bears are their warriors now, and besides guarding Tenma, they also train for battles. They train properly to fight with a spear and do various exercises to strengthen their bodies. Diluc thought that they were taking on too many tasks. With so much work, it must be very difficult, and they also want to help with the construction of the castle. The main character invited the audience to summon a new spirit using his skill. It would be better if there were even more workers. The two standing next to him turned towards him, listening to his suggestion. Diluc opened his status window and looked at the contents. His status window showed that he had already scored as many as 800 points out of 1,000 needed. In any case, there is very little left to save up. Today he plans to give his best, and then he will be able to summon another spirit to help the others so that they are not so busy. Carrot asked in surprise if they needed to be in such a hurry in this matter. Smiling, the hero replied that, in principle, it is possible to do everything not so quickly. He just really wants to do his best for his village. Therefore, he tries to do everything as quickly as possible and in a hurry. Listening to his words, the girl smiled. She thought he was just a great lord and told him so. Some time later, the one who took on really many tasks was Diluc himself. At one time, he and Cindy used alchemy to create magical objects in the form of glasses for sale at the Maple Trading Company. At other times, he helped a familiar family pump water from a pump, filling their jug while the children watched him. He and Carrot also used her skill to create traps in order to protect their nearby territories. Sometimes he would come into the kitchen and help Alice with the cooking by stirring the ingredients. He also attended the training sessions of the men from the bear tribe, watching them try to train and helping them with their training. Suddenly, he heard an alert and was delighted. He immediately opened his status window and saw that he had finally accumulated the number of points he needed. There are now exactly 1,000 of them. Moving away from the training people, he extended his hand forward. They immediately realized that now they would see the appeal of Mr. Diluc. Some of them had seen this with their own eyes for the first time, so they were happy about this event. At this moment, the main character himself was wondering who would appear in front of him this time. It was quite an interesting lottery. For this summoning, he does not read out a long spell. He immediately called the ancients, and a cloud of dust engulfed him from all sides and flew away from his side with a loud sound. A cluster of magic struck the ground between the man and the bears, who were standing nearby. This time the hero was very surprised to see who he had summoned. A man with long gray hair and a beard stood in front of him. He was wearing a military uniform and a raincoat. A sword hung from his belt and there was a scar on his forehead. He asked why he, Biluc, had been called up. The summoned spirit had an indifferent and calm face. His gaze itself seemed to be cold. Unlike the other girls he had previously summoned, this spirit did not look particularly happy because he was called. The main character introduced himself to the summoned man as Diluc timidly, and said that he was very pleased to meet him. Suddenly, something flashed very close to him, and he drew attention to it by looking at the side where there were movements. Although his eyes widened in shock, he reacted extremely quickly. The old man in front of him was surprised. Standing in a fighting stance with his knees slightly bent, he watched the young man. It turned out that what he saw at his side was the old man's long sword. An ancient spirit attacked him with a weapon, but the hero was able to notice his lunge and managed to pull out his sword, blocking the blow of that one. He used the sword as a shield, taking a blow at it. The men of the bear tribe were indignant. Clenching their fists, they shouted about who this old man was and why he just attacked their head. They were clearly discouraged and angry. Finally, the spirit put his sword back in its scabbard and said that Biluc was not going to obey a weakling. If he wants him to obey him, then he needs to show his strength, and only after that he will follow him further. The main character was a little discouraged by this situation. He clearly hadn't expected such a welcome from a newly summoned spirit. So this old man needs his strength. Biluc said that the two of them would have a duel. He looked more satisfied, and his face was no longer as emotionless as it had been when he was first called up. Apparently, he enjoyed the fact that the hero was able to parry his attack earlier. Hearing about the duel, Diluc froze. He stood in place and looked at his opponent with a discouraged expression. Finally coming to his senses, he agreed to this duel with the spirit. He grabbed the hilt of the sword with both of his hands and pointed it forward towards the old man. He turned to Biluc, already telling him more confidently that he was accepting his challenge. The three bears behind the old man stood in place, not moving, and watched them. The spirit liked his courage. Once again, taking out his sword from the scabbard that hung on his belt, he pointed his weapon towards the hero, preparing for a duel. He decided to give him a head start, saying that he could attack him as he wanted. The main character immediately noticed that this spirit had an incredible aura. Just standing in place, there was a huge force from him, which seemed to be pouring light from his body. Diluc didn't look at his skill, but he seemed to have more power. A similar aura has already emanated from the hero himself. Biluc chuckled as he noticed that the hero got used to chi very quickly. That's what it means to have a summoning skill. The hero was able to conquer and master the summoning skill. The main character had heard about chi for the first time and did not know what it was. He understood that the difference in their combat experience was huge. If he didn't give his all in this duel, he would definitely lose to the ancient spirit. The three of the bear tribe continued to silently watch what was happening. Some of them were discouraged, and some were a little angry about what was happening. Shifting his leg to get into a more comfortable position, the hero thought to himself that he could not possibly lose now. Tightening his grip on the hilt of his sword with both hands, he abruptly moved forward. The old man stretched out his sword arm and parried the hero's blow by crossing their swords with each other. The sharp blades of the weapons made sounds as they rubbed against each other, while their masters tried to fend off each other's swords. Finally, they knocked their swords aside in preparation for another attack. The man was watching his opponent closely without moving his gaze away. He noticed that the hero's chi had increased again and his aura had become more powerful. He continued to move forward and attack the spirit without stopping. He was focused, and his newly acquired aura continued to shine, enveloping his body. At some point, it became difficult for the man to fend off the attacks. It was evident from his tense face. His lips curled and his eyebrows wrinkled, which caused him to have wrinkles on his forehead between his eyebrows. Seeing this expression on his face, and the fact that it was becoming difficult for Diluc, the main character realized that he needed to attack right now so that everything would work out for him. He decided to use the Rabilo style. His technique was to cut the starry shadow. He kicked off the ground with his feet and moved forward with lightning speed. He swung his sword back to gain strength and deliver another decisive blow for this battle. Diluc rushed by without stopping, and at some point he was already behind the old man. They had their backs to each other. At first glance, it seemed as if the hero had missed or the old man was able to dodge the blow. They continued to stand in place, not turning to each other and not lowering their swords. A second later, Baliko abruptly dropped to one knee on the ground. He was leaning on the ground with one hand. His sword fell out of his hands right next to him. Despite the fact that he was defeated in this duel, the old man was smiling. He turned his head slightly to the side where the hero continued to stand motionless. Diluc said it was great. The surprised guy turned back and looked at him. He was very surprised to see the spirit kneeling in front of him. The latter bowed to him, showing his respect. He admitted defeat and called Diluc the young master, apparently accepting him as the master. The hero, looking at this, opened his mouth wide. Diluc, putting his palms forward, asked a little nervously what he was doing now. He asked him to get up from his knees. He was clearly a little uncomfortable with this situation. She made him uncomfortable and embarrassed. Smiling, the old man raised his head, and looking at the main character said that his chi was simply amazing in battle. The hero asked what the chi he was talking about was. Then the man realized that, after all, until now it has not remained in people's memory. The throne of the bears remained standing in place, just looking at them from the side. The old man explained that, simply put, this is a different way of training, different from magic power. Chi can master everything. Chi comes with improved physical abilities. After his explanations, Diluc realized what kind of surge of strength it was at the beginning of their duel. But still, Diluc noticed that the young master's chi was different. He said that his chi is called a stand. The main character asked what kind of persistent chi it was. The Hone chi is divided into persistent and soft. To fight monsters, you need a steadfast one, and to subdue a soft one. In their duel, the old man definitely felt the persistent chi coming from the hero. As far as he remembers, such chi was possessed by the great swordsman Berserk, who became a legend. After hearing about the great Berserker swordsman, the main character looked at the man in surprise. He said that in the past, the swordsman was his disciple and surpassed him with his strength. He hadn't expected to meet someone like him after all these years. The hero scratched his head in embarrassment, saying that he did not even know if he could be on par with such an amazing person as a berserker. The old man noticed that he was as humble as the other one. They were similar in that too. Putting his palm to his stomach, he bowed slightly in front of the hero, saying that he could order him in battles. The bears were still watching from that place as the two were having a dialogue about something of their own. One of them, whose hair was the longest, nevertheless came closer to the men, asking if this spirit's name was Diluc. The bear with dark hair, putting his hand on his heart, asked to train them. Those standing behind him were also confident. Diluc looked at them in surprise and remained silent. The bear added that the old man said that anyone can master chi if they train. They may not achieve steady chi, but they want to help their master in some way. Diluc scratched his chin in thought. In his time, the people of the bear tribe were strong warriors, but the current one standing right in front of him clearly did not suit him at all. The guy twisted his face when he heard this from the old man. Diluc, standing behind the spirit, also asked Diluc for them. He clearly liked what they offered. With a displeased face, the old man said that since the master was asking him, in that case he could not refuse. He immediately warned that his training was harsh. The bears will obviously have great difficulties with him. Ignoring this, the dark-haired man thanked the spirit for having decided to train them anyway. Looking at this, Diluc smiled. He was very glad that they quickly resolved this issue and everyone was satisfied. Carrot came up behind him unnoticed. She was surprised to see that Diluc had arrived. Hearing her voice, the hero turned around and called out to her. A little further away from them, Diluc was talking to a bear guy, most likely discussing their future workouts. She immediately realized that it looked like he had started training, and very soon they would need to build a castle. Diluc apologized to her for this, because they clearly had fewer assistants. The main character explained to her that those who remained would help her in any way they could. She calmed him down, saying that everything was fine. She asked me to rely on her. Apparently she already had some kind of plan. She couldn't wait for the moment when strong warriors would defend the castle she would build. After training their chi from Diluc, the guys from the bear tribe will become much stronger. The hero agrees with her. He was also looking forward to this moment. All the sun's rays broke through the clouds, illuminating one of the parts of the wall that was recently built around the village. A few days later, the coastal territories of Tenma. There was an undulating mountainous area covered with dense trees. The seashore was very close. The bears continued to conduct their training sessions under the guidance of Diluc. They practiced their punches, repeating the same movement over and over again. Chi is born in a strong body, so you need to be much faster, and Diluc urged them on. Diluc came up to them. He noticed how hard everyone was trying in training, and it made him smile. Diluc, who noticed him, smiled, greeting his master. He asked if he was also patrolling in this area. He explained that since their territory had increased, he decided to check in this place as well. Upon learning about this, Diluc told him that he had done a good job. Turning his back on the bear tribe guys, his face turned stern again. He reported that they had no problems with training. Therefore, Diluc should not worry and he can continue his rounds further. After that, he shouted at the guys to do another 100 sets of this exercise. Seeing what was happening, the hero replied a little skeptically and sympathetically to the guys that it was probably true. After that, he really decided to go further and informed Diluc about it. He asked him to be careful on the way. The main character moved along the path between the trees, thinking that he needed to keep an eye on the monsters in the area. There are also a lot of bandits near the coastal territories. The influence of the rest of the country does not extend to Tenma, so they stayed here. He recalled a moment from the past when they had already had to face bandits and then Cindy could have been hurt. Gripping the hilt of his sword, he thought that he needed to be even more careful. A light breeze blew towards him, blowing his hair. They started getting into his eyes, so one of them had to be covered. The wind was flying towards him from the sea. The bright rays of the sun reflected off the water surface. The landscape that opened up in front of him was extremely beautiful. He was so beautiful that the main character said it out loud. Wandering a little further, he saw the harbor to the side. It was not a large wooden bridge made of planks that was located near the rocky shore. The main character moved on, passing through the stones. Stepping over the hills, he reached the harbor. Passing further along it, he noticed a boat behind a rock and moved towards it. What he saw next shocked him very much. Something seemed to flash right by my eye. The guy was being circled by 3 men from all sides. They pointed their spears and swords at him, aiming straight at his head. The boat that he noticed behind the rock turned out to be a real pirate ship of no small size. The ship itself looked more civilized, but the sails were pretty battered and torn in some places. A black flag with a dragon depicted on it was tied to the flagpole, and a huge skull covered it from above. One of the pirates with blonde hair, who was standing right face to face with the hero, asked who he was. An oppressive atmosphere reigned around. The main character, as if not afraid at all, called himself Diluc timidly and introduced himself as the new lord of these lands. Next, he asked the pirates who they were. He looked straight into the eyes of the other person without taking his gaze away. The pirate realized that in this case his influence does not extend to the sea. The pirate looked quite young with a strong physique. His face looked fierce. He was clearly unhappy about something. The pirate said that the hero's job is clearly not an easy one. He said that he and his team are a band of pirates called pterodactyls, and they live in this place. Upon hearing that they were pirates, the heroes turned to stone. Apparently, the flag with the skull did not give him any clues about who he was facing. The second pirate was squatting at his side. He put his spear even closer to the hero's head and said that it was better for him not to move. He had a rather smug expression on his face. He had already clearly signed himself up as a winner. The main character drew attention to the tip of the spear, which was approaching his face. He grabbed it with his hand, which was wearing the bracelet that the dwarf had made for him. The aura covered his body again. Surprised, the pirate pulled away, asking what he was doing now. In an instant, the main character was able to crush his spear with only one hand, breaking it into 2 parts. The pirate, who remained standing with the second part of the spear in his hand, shouted in surprise that he had broken it with his bare hands. The third pirate, with a black scarf on his head and a scared face, swung his sword. I wish to hit the hero. Diluc immediately grabbed his arm with the weapon and pulled him closer to him. Holding him with one hand, he slapped his palm with the other, causing the weapon to fall out of his hands. The shocked pirate looked at his shaking hand and started swearing. This situation clearly scared him a little. The pirate, who was the very first to start a dialogue, gritted his teeth in anger, calling him a damned official. Grabbing the hilt of his sword with both hands, he moved towards the main character, shouting that he needed to stop interfering with them. The main character did not wait for someone else's weapon to touch him, and immediately took out his sword, instantly knocking his opponent's blade out of his hands. Unarmed pirates stood in place around the main character. The youngest member of the team turned to the blonde man. He asked them what to do. If they are caught now, they will definitely be returned to the city. The man asked him not to panic. Calling the hero an official again, he shouted that he really wanted to destroy the quiet place they had always been looking for. There was fear and panic on his face now. The main character thought to himself that he would not be able to come to an agreement with them. The pirate took out a second blade, saying he couldn't let him do it. He pointed his weapon at him. Watching him, he realized that the battle could not be avoided. Pushing off from his seat, he seemed to fly into the air, all surrounded by magic. The shocked pirate asked if he had really taken off. The main character decided to use the timidly midnight sword dance style. The magic around him swirled around his body. The pirate tried to cover his face with his hand from the wind and did not defend himself at all. He didn't understand what was going on. The wind got into his eyes, which was why his view was limited. It was at this moment that the main character decided to attack. But instead of attacking with his sword, the hero stretched out his hand and called Henkyou. A dragon appeared out of nowhere, flapping its wings. She asked the gentleman if he had called her. Lifting their heads up, the pirates watched the huge creature with spikes sticking out of its body. The main character appeared on top of this creature in a split second. They were high in the air, towering over the bandits. All three men stared wide-mouthed at the dragon that hovered in the air right in front of them. The pirate leader's pupils reflected everything that was happening in front of him. He, not believing in what was happening, asked if he was real. He stretched out his hand upwards, as if wanting to touch this mythical creature. He did not believe that they really existed and tried to accept it. Lowering his head down, he said that they could not overcome the dragon in any way. The main character sits comfortably on the back of the dragon and begins to watch the pirates from above. Suddenly one of them, standing in the middle, in fear and anticipation of his death, falls to his knees with a loud sound. Seeing this, Diluc is surprised and frowns. It begins to seem to him that the pirates are no longer going to attack him. Then the main character gets off the dragon and jumps to the ground to them. He leans on his knees and with a friendly smile turns to the man who has fallen to his knees and invites him to tell him about his intentions. After that, the situation between people changes for the better and the guys sit in a circle. The man nervously lowers his gaze and tells that the story of how his company became pirates began with the escape from the city, remembering his past. Then he says that the aristocrats there forced them to work tirelessly, beating them for any little things, remembering how he dragged heavy boards, bags, and did other dirty work. Then the man adds that some of them were even forced to fight for money, and a ring with two fighters pops up in front of his eyes, dozens of people watching the fight. That's why the three men ran away from the city, away from such a life, taking with them everything they needed. The pirate remembers the dawn he saw when he came to the shore strewn with sand, and says that after long wanderings they arrived at the sea, after which they were finally able to live without caring about anything. The man says that the sea became their home while his comrades sat and listened in silence. The main character, looking into the void, thinks about something and concludes that this is why the pirates did not want to return to the city. Then he decides to ask the man why he lowered his sword when he saw Henkyou. Upon hearing such a question, the pirate suddenly raises his head up to look at the dragon and tries to answer something. But then he says that when he and his comrades were still plowing in the city, one of their acquaintances told stories about dragons. The men were very fascinated by these stories and listened attentively to them with great interest. According to the pirate, the stories were about the legendary era when dragons lived. Then there was peace and tranquility without hunger and discrimination. When Diluc hears that they are talking about the legendary era, he immediately shudders and decides that this is Tenma in the past. At this time, the pirate says that they went to sea, wanting freedom and tranquility, making this dragon a symbol. However, then he raises his head up again and adds that their wishes were just fairy tales. It turned out that there is no such thing as peace in life, and men had to survive by stealing things from the rich. Then the main character suddenly frowns and realizes that they were also oppressed. During the story, the man begins to get very angry, which makes him clench his hand into a fist and adds that it was their revenge for all that humiliation. But Diluc begins to object, saying that this does not change the essence and the pirates stole anyway. Then he adds with a serious look that they won't get away with it that easily. However, in response to this, the man just grins, surprised at how stubborn the main character is, and convinces him that he and his comrades will get out anywhere. Then Diluc suddenly gets up and is about to answer something. He asks the pirates if they will make a deal with Tenma in such a case. For a man, this causes great surprise, which causes his eyes to open wide and his pupils to become small. The main character explains that he wants to hire pirates in his village, and all three men are shocked by this news. But Diluc continues anyway. He says that he needs their hard work and knowledge about the sea and offers in return guaranteed money and housing, keeping a confident, friendly smile on his face. Then the man cautiously replies that they, of course, can help with information about the sea and decides to ask why he needs it at all. The main character remembers what the pirates were talking about a few minutes ago and says that if they were serious, they have one dream with him. Upon hearing this, the man immediately frowns and asks in what sense they have the same dream. Then Diluc explains that the legendary era that the pirates were talking about existed in Tenma, and tells that he is trying to revive it. The man suddenly screams, asking if he really wants to revive this era and assumes that such a thing cannot be done. However, in response, the main character does not answer anything at first, but only smiles with complete confidence. Then, clenching his hand into a fist, he says that with his skill he can summon ancient creatures, together with whom he wants to return this era. Diluc turns to the man and holds out his hand to him, asking once again if the pirates will help him. He casts his shocked glance at the hero's hand and freezes in place for several seconds. The man thinks about what Diluc did not show them, but only offered to cooperate, still continuing to look at him. Then he remembers that before they were only oppressed all the time, and seeing how the main character held out his hand to them, unlike those people, he clenches his palm into a fist. Then the pirates begin to look at each other, about to make a decision. After that, the man gets to his feet, leaning on his knees, and reminds the hero that he introduced himself as Diluc. At the same moment, the pirate holds out his hand to him and asks with full confidence if he will allow him to help him. The main character is surprised by this reaction and opens his eyes wide. Then the man explains that they also want to see this era, realizing that it may sound a little brazen. Hearing this, Diluc also decides to extend his hand in response and says that he is ready to rely on the pirates. After these words, the guys have a strong handshake. The main character and the pirate shake hands, looking into each other's eyes, while the other two pirates watch with a smile. Some time has passed since that moment. Former pirates began to return stolen items. In addition, as promised, they shared information about the sea, showing everything on the map. Their knowledge proved to be very useful. They talked about safety measures, fish, and the like. And then the pirates did something that people clearly did not expect from them. To see their creation, the crowd gathered near the sea on the pier. The main character cast his gaze at a large and beautiful ship floating in the sea, while Cindy brings her hands to her face and clenches them into fists in surprise. Diluc asks if this ship is intended for Tenma, to which the man responds positively and adds that Tenma's fishing vessel is now in front of them. Then the main character turns his attention to the flag and notices the Robilo family coat of arms on it, consisting of a crescent moon and a dragon, wondering how the guys managed to do it. Diluc turns to the man and begins to thank him, calling him Captain Dodoria. A little embarrassed, he replies that you can't hang a pirate flag in such a situation. Alice, beaming with happiness, tries to imagine how much they will be able to catch using this ship, and calls it a fairy tale. The main character hears this idea, and then suggests in this case to go fishing right away. After that, Dodoria's comrade comes out of the crowd, and informs him that he will now go and lower the ladder. Finally, Diluc's foot sets foot on this big ship. He leans against the side and looking down enjoys the great breeze. At this time, Cindy also stands near the side, looking at the hero and straightening her hair. On the other side of the ship, a joyful Alice and a dwarf are talking to a bear as leaves fly past them. At the same moment, Dodoria's comrades pull on the ropes to open the sails, looking at their captain. Dodoria himself controls the steering wheel, but suddenly turns to them and says encouraging words. Then he informs everyone that they are leaving, and the ship begins to overcome low waves while the guys are watching. The rays of the sun begin to illuminate the ship, as if blessing it on its way. Three comrades turn to everyone to see their reaction. The same ones turn around in response, after which they frown and begin to rejoice with full confidence. The main character too. The sea calms down, and the ship begins to sail through it with increasing smoothness. Cindy and Alice come to the side to look down and admire the sea water, while Dodoria suspiciously watches them. Then he turns to his companions and asks if those girls are the ancient spirits, in response to which they tell him that it looks like that. Then the captain casts his gaze at Diluc, remembering that he calls incredible people and saying that it is better not to joke with his skill. Suddenly, Cindy comes up to them and apologizes for bothering them. She decides to ask if they will fish in the open sea, and an excited Dodoria gives a positive answer. But then he adds that because of the weather, it would be better to swim a little more. to which she smiles and thanks him. The captain is a little embarrassed and says that Cindy does not need to be polite to criminals like them. But she is suddenly surprised and reports that she has heard that they have become better behaved. Dodoria looks down at the floor and admits that they are not used to someone treating them as equals. Upon hearing this, the girl smiles again, closing her eyes and being touched by such a reaction. But then she turns to the men and assures them that in Tenma they will quickly get used to it. Cindy says that the master's goal is to make a place where everyone will be happy, after which she clarifies that everyone will be happy without exception. The captain and his companions are surprised at this at first, but then they begin to smile, believing the girl's words. Then, when she goes to the side of the ship, Dodoria joyfully announces an offer to catch fish and thereby please the inhabitants of Tenma. Suddenly, Cindy turns to the hero, forcing him to turn around and take his mind off his studies. She asks if he feels anything, and he replies that this activity is not much different from finding monsters. Then Diluc closes his eyes, trying to focus on something. He tries to feel the sea as if scanning it at great depth. Suddenly, the main character opens his eyes and points his finger down at the girl, saying that there are a lot of fish there. Watching this, Cindy begins to clap her hands and admire his abilities. After that, a dwarf approaches her and informs her that the magic tool is ready, for which the girl thanks him. Then she points to the fishing tool and says that it is her magic net, which automatically closes when a fish gets into it. Then she adds that she made it even bigger to catch a lot of prey, from which the main character begins to rejoice and thank her. In response, Cindy puts her hand to her face and says that she will do anything for Mr. Diluc. After that, she thinks that she should quickly reset the network, when suddenly she turns around and notices that Alice is already doing this, which is very surprising. In response, the girl apologizes and replies that she couldn't wait any longer. Cindy walks up to her and grinning says that when it comes to food, she becomes downright obsessed. She starts helping Alice and Alice starts laughing with her. Then the girl starts to lower the net and says that she hopes that they will catch a lot. Suddenly, the main character notices a familiar failing, which makes his face change a lot. At the same moment, he turns to the girls and shouts at them to stop. Suddenly, Alice hears a strange sound. Fear begins to appear in her eyes and she wonders, what is that sound? Then both girls notice that their net has broken off, and part of it has begun to sink to the bottom. This makes Diluc very wary, and he says that there is definitely someone under the ship. Hearing this, Dodoria also tenses up and even begins to guess who it might be. Suddenly, a huge monster's body appears out of the water, and the guys recognize it as a sea monster. He had a long horn on his forehead, and long hair and huge fangs protruded from his mouth with many sharp teeth. When Diluc sees the monster, he gets a little scared, which makes him open his mouth a little. His pupils are greatly reduced and his eyes are wide open. The main character tells that earlier he went to the shore, which became their territory. There he was surrounded by a pirate crew under the command of Dodoria, who was very unfriendly. However, their dreams of an ancient civilization turned out to be similar, and so they decided to cooperate for the sake of Tenma's future. Then Diluc says that after that they received a ship from the pirates, which became their fishing vessel. After that, the guys went out to sea to catch fish. Frightened, Cindy and Alice turned to the hero, waiting for further orders from him. However, he, still looking overboard, still cannot believe that they have met a sea monster. At this moment, the monster rises slightly and approaches the ship to attack it. Then it lets out a very loud scream, showing its sharp fangs and teeth. At the same moment, the monster makes a dash towards the ship. From the impact, the ship begins to shake from side to side, which makes the hero and Cindy barely manage to stay on their feet. Suddenly, Dodoria, holding onto the mast, begins to shout to Diluc about this monster, saying that his name is Tadozer, and that, according to rumors, he destroys ships with his horn. At this time, the sea monster is preparing to strike the ship again. Looking at this, Diluc thinks that he needs to be taken away from the ship as soon as possible. He realizes that a battle with a monster in the middle of the sea will definitely damage the ship and tries to come up with something. Then the main character raises his hand up and decides to summon Henkyou. At the same moment, a large dragon appears in the sky, not far from the ship, which forces the monster to pay attention to itself and distract from the attack. Dodoria's comrades are very surprised to see Henkyou, and the captain himself recognizes in him the dragon that appeared during their fight with the hero. At this time, the dragon flies a little closer to give Diluc the opportunity to grab hold of himself. The main character does so, after which he flies high into the sky with Henkyou pulling out his sword. Seeing this, Cindy, standing by the side, immediately frowns and asks what he is up to. The dragon begins to fly away from the ship, and Diluc begins to shout at the monster to follow them. When the monster begins to swim in their direction, the main character responds to Cindy, shouting that he will take care of Tadozer. Then the girl realizes that Diluc is distracting the monster's attention from the ship in order to protect the others. Watching the monster continue to swim after him, the main character begins to think that in this way he will be able to take him even further. Suddenly he turns to Henkyou and asks if he can go down closer to the water, and he agrees to do so. The dragon begins to descend rapidly, and the monster, seeing this, begins to prepare for battle. Approaching him, the main character puts the sword in front of him, and an unusual aura appears around him. Cindy suddenly notices that this is not ordinary magic and begins to suspect that he is using something else. Diluc hears this and thinks that the girl is right, because this is the chi. When there is less than a meter between him and the monster, he points his sword at Tadozor, striking. The main character confidently points his sword at the monster and hits it with the help of chi. After that, an aura also appears around Tadozor. At this time, the worried guys were watching this from the ship. Cindy frowned and watched the hero's every move. Alice and the bear watched, not knowing what to expect, and Dodoria and his companions just stood to the side doing nothing. Diluc remains watching the monster intently with a frown on his face. He's still holding the sword pointed at the monster when suddenly it lets out a growl. Then he falls silent and suddenly worships the hero, which makes him decide to lower his weapon. At the same moment, Tadozor opens his eyes, which become cute and makes a friendly sound. Seeing this, Diluc finally exhales with relief and begins to smile. The girls also begin to rejoice that the danger has passed and are touched by the monster's reaction, while Dodoria stands behind and does not understand anything. The dragon notices that he used a soft chi and says it was great. He decides to stroke Tadozor and asks him to try not to arrange this next time, in response to which he again makes a friendly sound in agreement. After that, Diluc returns to the ship. Cindy immediately rushes to him, asking him not to scare him like that anymore. The main character apologizes to her and justifies himself by saying that he did not have time to explain. Then Dodoria comes up to them and says that they surprised him a lot, because, without making much effort, they conquered Tadozor, nicknamed the Lord of the Sea. But in response, Diluc tells with a smile that he did it all thanks to chi. Then a bear joined him, saying that he had heard about this ability from a teacher and concluded that the main character was definitely an unusual person. Alice begins to praise him, when suddenly Cindy screams that these are her words. Then Diluc draws attention to the dwarf, and he informs that Cindy has already fixed the network, after which the hero expresses his gratitude to her. Then he turns to all the guys and happily announces the start of fishing, which causes a violent reaction from those. After a while, the guys Diluc, Cindy, and the bear take out a fishing net to look at the catch. Despite the fact that they expected a good result, there were even more fish, which Alice began to be very happy about. The hero was also pleased with such a catch. Cindy starts having fun jumping on the spot, while Dodoria's companions were surprised by such a large number of fish. After a little more time, the ship arrives at the pier. There is a lot of loot on it, which is placed in special cells. At the same time, the other part of the catch was tied to the front of the ship and hung on an outstretched stick. Looking at the large number of fish, the main character clenches his fists and admires such a catch. Alice folds her hands in front of her and says that now they have a lot of seafood and imagines how much she can cook. Then she starts happily rushing between Dodoria and Cindy, admiring both of them. The girl tells the first one that it's all thanks to the pirate's knowledge of the sea, after which she adds that the second one's magic tool is also beautiful. At the same time, one of the captain's companions approaches one of the fish and asks if it is even possible to eat this huge fish. This question clearly shocks Alice, which is why she immediately changes her face and throws her indignant look at the man. Then she clenches her fists and starts screaming, outraged that people in the current era do not eat tuna. Upon hearing the name of this fish, the hero admits that he has never tasted it, which Alice is very surprised at. She begins to get angry, not understanding how they cannot know the incredible taste of this fish, and decides to make them know its value. Alice opens her eyes, in which a spark suddenly lights up, and promises the guys to cook fish for them. After that, the girl puts on an apron, arms herself with a knife, and starts butchering the fish. She makes a swing with the instrument. Then she separates the two halves of a large tuna body, which she cut effortlessly. The main character is surprised at how Alice quickly coped with such a large amount of work, and Cindy concludes that the girl is also skilled with seafood. After a while, the girl serves the cooked and beautifully laid out dish to the guys, and thanks them for waiting. Diluc admires it and says it looks delicious, while Cindy notices that everything is very beautifully sliced, smells delicious, and brings back memories. Alice is a little embarrassed and reports that after cutting up a lot of meat turned out, and then the main character offers to have lunch right on the ship, admitting that he expected something like this. Then the bear comes to the table and pours wine into a glass, while the dwarf brings the plates. The glass is gradually filled with a drink with the sound of liquid bubbling. Cindy folds her hands in front of her and invites everyone to have a full lunch, and then Diluc wishes them a pleasant appetite. After that, he pins the meat on a fork and puts it in his mouth to taste. At the same moment, Diluc begins to admire the taste of the food and admits that he did not know that there was such a juicy fish. Alice tells with a satisfied face that if you use her skill, then each fish becomes very tasty, after which she advises the hero to eat sashimi with salt to enjoy the taste of the ingredients. Then she turns to him and remembers that he made the salt, but he explains that he was just using Cindy's skill. At this time, the latter eats the dish with pleasure and says that it is not surprising that it is so delicious. Suddenly, the main character remembers about the rest of the crew and turns back while his friends continue their meal. He turns to Dodoria and his companions, offering them to have lunch with them too, but the captain refuses this. The man glances at his reflection in the glass, doubting that it would be normal if they ate with them. However, in response, Diluc smiles and convinces Dodoria that there is nothing wrong with this. He notices that everyone here was born at different times, looking at the way Cindy smiles. Then, looking at the dwarf and the bear, he adds that they belong to different species. After that, he glances at Alice, who is holding 2 plates in both hands. But from this, the main character concludes that everyone is equal in Tenma, and therefore they eat at the common table. He asks the former pirates to sit down and try the dishes, because Alice's food is very tasty. Then Dodoria carefully takes a fork in her hand, and hesitating a lot, thanks the hero for the food. Then he stabs the meat and puts it in his mouth to taste. The second he puts that hand down on the table, something starts dripping on top of it. Tears begin to flow from Dodoria's eyes, and he says that this taste is much better than stolen food. At this time, his happy companions begin to devour the food with both cheeks. One of them is also starting to cry, and the other is trying to hold back. Dodoria recalls that they met with Diluc quite recently and admits that despite this, he is already glad to meet them, in response to which he admits the same. But then he picks up a bottle of wine and adds that he is not the only one who is glad to see this meeting. Suddenly, the main character raises his hand up, looking at the sky, and informs them that someone else wanted to greet them. At the same moment, Henkyou appears above all the guys and they begin to rejoice at his appearance. Dodoria's companions are a little surprised, but despite this, a smile appears on their face while Dodoria himself is very scared. The dragon lands on the ship and the guys decide to approach him, someone to stroke, someone to hug. Looking at this, the main character closes his eyes and smiles contentedly. The captain and his companions decide to sit on Henkyou's back, and he begins to roll them. At this time, the rest of the guys are watching this with joyful faces, touched by the reaction of the former pirates. Suddenly, the main character smiles broadly and starts laughing. Then Dodoria and his companions see this, and they also start laughing with joy. Several more days have passed since that day. Diluc says that after a while, the development of the port began on the shore of Tenma. Dodoria and Cindy are standing at the port and looking at the map together, trying to figure something out, while the main character tests his strength. Diluc notices that the pier should also be repaired, after which the captain apologizes for such a hack. Then the hero draws attention to the many trees and rocks, and thinks that he should consult with Karoth about safety. Suddenly, there is some movement in the bushes and Diluc accidentally notices it. He is surprised that something has moved, but he does not feel magic nearby at all. The main character decides to inform the guys that someone is hiding in the bushes, forcing them to take their minds off the lesson and be surprised. Then he carefully approaches the place where he saw the movement. Suddenly, Diluc notices someone's tail sticking out of the foliage, which is swinging from side to side. At the same moment, a little girl with ears jumps out of the bushes, realizing that she has been noticed. She tells the hero not to approach and calls him a henchman of Roses. Her appearance surprises the guys a lot. Dodoria tries to figure out what's going on, Cindy looks at the girl in a puzzled way, and Diluc asks her who she is. The main character meets a girl with ears in the bushes, who is clearly unfriendly. He decides to ask her who she is, while Dodoria and Cindy are standing behind him and watching her. However, the girl starts screaming in response, telling Diluc not to approach, calling him a man. Then she stretches out her hand and notices that people have got here, after which her hand turns into a paw with claws. Dodoria notices that the girl has transformed her hand and is very surprised by this. Then he adds that he has seen this only once, and the main character concludes that she is a half-human who has the characteristics of dogs. But the girl starts screaming again, telling him not to dare to say anything about her brothers and calls him a henchman of Roses. From what he heard, Diluc falls into a stupor and tries to remember something about Roses. Cindy thinks about it and remembers that Roses is that town nearby. and he, agreeing with her, assumes that something bad has happened. Then the main character decided to ask if the girl could tell him about the details, after which he introduces himself as Diluc Rabilo, the lord of the village of Tenma. Then he draws attention to the ship's flag, and notes that that coat of arms is different from his coat of arms. However, the girl suddenly screams, ordering the hero to quickly shut up. She says that people are her enemies and says that she will never forget how they burned down her house. Upon hearing this, the main character immediately frowns and becomes alert, realizing that most likely someone attacked her house. Then he decides to ask about what happened in Roses and starts reaching out to her. But the girl says that she is not going to talk to people, because Mr. Hakuro will decide, after which she turns her back on Diluc. Then she makes a dash and starts jumping through the bushes from one to the other. At this time, the main character remains standing in place, just watching her. Dodoria also notices that the girl has left, and Cindy turns to Diluc, worried about him. He puts his hand to his chin and wonders what she meant, since he didn't understand much. He remembers that Acto is now the Lord of Roses, and understands that it is dangerous to ignore such things. Then he turns to his friends and says that he wants to know more about what is happening in Tenma's neighborhood, after which he offers to follow the girl and find out everything, to which Cindy replies that she will go too. Then Dodoria frowned and looked down, saying that it should not be left like this and it was worth fighting back against Roses. However, the hero did not agree with him and replied that there was no need to give them a reason to attack, so now he just offers to go on a reconnaissance mission. Suddenly, he thinks again, remembers the angry face of that girl, and concludes that it looks like the situation is not easy. Then he suggests that Cindy and Dodoria move into the forest, to which they agree and follow him. They decide to go there with the dragon and, sitting on its back, fly high above the forest. Dodoria asks the hero where the people to whom that girl belongs live while he examines everything below. Then he turns to his friend and replies that they live in the forest of the White Wolf. Diluc says that this forest is located both on the territory of Tenma and on the territory of Roses. And since this land is not governed by a country, many half-humans live on it. But suddenly the main character notices that there is a large empty space among the trees and frowns heavily. He reports that they are approaching the border of Tenma and points ahead. When the guys land, they come down to the ground to look around. At first, the hero tries to find words, not knowing what to say, but then looking ahead he wonders, what is it? He sees the ruins of houses, burned trees, wounded half-humans, and the girl he met in the bushes. Looking at this, Cindy puts her hand to her face and calls what is happening some kind of horror. Dodoria also notices that everything is burned out here and talks about it, and the main character, seeing such a picture, becomes very serious. Suddenly the girl turns around and notices them, asking if they were stalking her. Diluc carefully tries to talk to her and first decides to apologize. Then he tells her that he just wants to know what happened here. Then the girl stays in place and says that this horror was not caused by the residents of the City of Roses. Then she turns her attention first to the lonely girl and then to the child sitting next to his parent. The girl asks if the guys want to know about what happened here and what people did to her people. The girl frowns and says that all this happened after Lord Rasasa was replaced. Upon hearing this, the main character changes his mind and becomes wary, suspecting something. Initially, there were few demons in the White Wolf Forest, as many demi-humans lived in peace and tranquility on the territory. But one day, people from Roses came with money and food and said that if the beastmen obeyed Mr. Acto, their territories and lives would be saved. Then Acto himself suggested that they themselves understand what will happen in case of refusal. The chief among the beastmen waved his hand, causing the others to be surprised. The girl says that her father, who was the head of the settlement, agreed with this and signed the document. According to her, this was the beginning of a living hell. She remembers how one of the beastmen was captured after that, despite his fear and resistance. Then a spear was pointed at him, after which Acto ordered the men to be handed over to his factories. He turned his attention to the other beastmen and added, ordering them to give out women for their warriors, which made them very scared. And then Acto turned to the others, and in addition informed them that they would pay tribute to them every week. In the end, he argued that from now on he is the king and god here. Acto informed the beastmen that they now had no freedom of religion, which made them surprised and upset. Then he turned his attention to the statue and decided to order the disposal of the figurines of this dog, threatening everyone with a bad end. The beastmen began to object, saying that Mr. Hakuro had always guided them and did not understand how to do this. Then the head of the settlement threw himself at Acto's feet and began to beg him to leave at least this statue. While telling this, the girl begins to get furious and frowns heavily, baring her teeth. In addition, her hand clenches into a fist. After that, the girl points her hand back and informs that the people from Roses burned everything anyway. Upon hearing this, the hero and Dodoria make a serious face and frown, and Cindy gets very upset. Tears begin to flow from the girl's eyes, and she begins to fiercely ask Diluc about what they could have done to people to deserve this. After a few seconds, she asks him to answer and repeats her question. Then she starts crying and asks what her dad and mom did so badly. After that, the girl calms down a little and clenches her palm into a fist. Seeing this, the main character decides to clarify where her parents are now. However, the girl says that she does not even have a clue if they are whole at all. She then explains that she was taken to Rose's shortly before the incident. Suddenly, she clenches her fist even tighter again and remembers that her friends are gone too. This news makes Dodoria and Cindy even more angry. Then the main character realizes that everything is even worse than he expected. He concludes that Acto did not think at all about people's lives, but simply went along with his desires and thinks that this is very similar to him. Then Diluc realizes that now Acto is capable of any cruelty and decides that he cannot be allowed to continue in the same spirit. He frowns heavily and tells himself that he needs to save these people. However, after a second, his face immediately changes and he decides to ask the girl if she wants to go to Tenma with them. Upon hearing this, she becomes enraged and decides to ask Diluc's proposal again. She puts her hand to her chest and asks if he really wants her to go to a human village, surprised that he thinks she will trust him. However, contrary to the girl's expectations, the main character says that she may not trust him, which is why her look changes a lot. Her eyes begin to look at Diluc's face and realize that he is very serious. Suddenly, he answers her that the girl herself must understand that there are many wounded here and that it is dangerous for them to stay here. But the girl behind whom there were ruins begins to object. She clenches her hands into fists and tries to say something, while fear begins to be read in her eyes. Suddenly, she hears a voice calling her name, calling her Kororo. The girl turns and sees a beastman behind her who stretches out his hand to her. At the same moment, she runs up to him and calls him Grandpa. He lies down on the ground out of impotence and tells Kororo that the main character is right, calling him a young man. Then he adds that they are already at the limit and convinces his granddaughter that the young man can help them. While the girl looks at his condition with horror in her eyes, he says that the beastman can move to Tenma. Grandfather remembers how Kororo alone collected food for them and ran around the dark territory in search of a quiet place. Then he turns to her and says that she did a good job, while tears begin to flow from her eyes like a river. The grandfather, with the last of his strength, decides to get up anyway and decides to tell his granddaughter one last time that now put pride aside and live. After Grandpa stops talking, Kororo stops crying and falls silent for a while. Then she turns to the guys anyway and tells the hero that she will accept his offer. However, then the girl throws her look at him, in which contempt was visible, and adds that half-humans cannot trust them. The girl explains that she doesn't ask for help, but she can't lie anymore because she doesn't see the point. In response, Diluc begins to look at the floor, smiles, and says that he understands her. However, he then clarifies that he understands her a little differently and tells her that Acto also drove him out of the house. Therefore, the main character thinks that he can understand the anger and sadness that Kororo is experiencing. He says he just wants her people to live, and the girl suddenly changes her face and starts crying. Then she grabs her clothes, not knowing what to say. However, then the girl hesitantly agrees with the hero. Then Kororo takes the surviving beastmen with him and leads them to a large settlement. Standing in front of the entrance, she informs her relatives that the village of Tenma is now in front of them. Then she sees the hero's friends and is a little surprised. The girl notices the bear man and the dwarf, after which she concludes that half-humans live here. Suddenly, a joyful Cindy appears behind her, who says that in the dark everyone cooperates and lives together. At the same moment, Kororo's gaze changes and his eyes become wider. Seeing this, the chief says that Cindy is not lying and everyone here is free in faith and culture. Then the girl takes out a small statuette and makes a conclusion about Hakuro's intentions. The main character approaches her and confirms her words by holding out his hand. First, Kororo hands the statuette to him. Diluc pays attention to her, and then the girl with a sad face tells that she is the only survivor. However, then she notices that the statuette is pretty cracked and is not in the best condition. Diluc begins to peer into this interesting object. Suddenly, he realizes that this statuette is a symbol of the pride of the people to whom Kororo belongs, looking at how she hugs her to herself. Then the main character politely smiles and offers to fix her thing, asking if the girl would mind it. Upon hearing this, Kororo raises his sad gaze at him, in which there was a drop of hope, and clarifies whether he can do it for sure. Suddenly, Cindy appears from behind him, who confirms her guesses and tells her to just give the statuette to the hero. For a while after that, Diluc and Kororo remain standing in place and look at each other. In the end, she still decides to hand the statuette to him. He is pleasantly surprised by her trust in him and makes him smile. He picks up the object and uses an alchemical transformation, after which the cracks on the statuette disappear. Kororo is greatly surprised by this and turns to Mr. Hakuro. Suddenly, tears begin to come to her eyes, and she calls the statuette the pride of her people. Diluc says that now they can only give this, and assures the girl that they will definitely help her. Then with a smile, he hands Kororo her statuette, while Cindy and Dodoria watch with kindness in their eyes. The girl casts her gaze at the thing and carefully stretches out her hand, while her relatives happily support her. The statuette is passed directly from hand to hand, and until the girl takes it, the main character does not let go of the object. Tears begin to flow from Kororo's eyes again, and she turns to Diluc, calling him master. In response, he just smiles and closes his eyes. Finally, the girl takes her thing from his hands, and hesitating a little, expresses her gratitude. Then she begins to discuss something with her relatives, while the main character silently watches this. He thinks about how they helped these half-humans, but realizes that the main problem has not yet been solved. After that, Diluc turns to the direction from which the wind blows, and promises that he will stop the tyranny of Acto for the sake of the inhabitants. The next day comes. The main character knocks on the door of the house before entering. When he goes inside, he sees in front of him the beastman sitting at the table and Alice, who serves them, as well as a dwarf. Diluc wishes everyone a good morning. Then everyone immediately pays attention to him and wishes him the same, rejoicing at his appearance. In response to this, the main character smiles and notices that the people of the Beastmen look quite cheerful today. He says that it has been several days since their arrival. Now the Beastmen are slowly getting used to life in Tenma. Diluc decides to ask one of the women about the condition of her arm wound, and she replies that everything is much better thanks to his potion. Then the hero becomes calmer. Suddenly he remembers Kororo and asks where she is now, turning back. The woman wants to tell him what the girl is doing at this time, when suddenly they both notice a tail sticking out from around the corner. At this moment, Kororo is sitting on his knees in front of a low table, taking one hand and the other in front of him. She turns to the great Hakuro and asks him to protect her mom and dad. At the same moment, the hero looks around the corner to watch her. He thinks about the fact that even though the Beastmen are here now, however, this does not change the fact that they have lost their home and relatives. Then the main character realizes that he wants to help Kororo's parents. Then he suddenly clenches his hand into a fist. His gaze becomes more furrowed, and he realizes that there is no choice left. After that, the story is transferred to another house. Diluc takes a step forward and begins his speech. He looks around at all the guys standing at the table and waiting for his words, and concludes that everyone has gathered. First, the hero casts his gaze at Cindy, Alice, and Dodoria standing on the right side. Then he looks at the bear, the dwarf, Karoth, and Biluc, looking at him from the left of the table. After that, he stops at the seriously minded Kororo. Then he decides to start, and at first admits that, frankly, he is going to fight with the City of Roses, but then corrects himself and clarifies that he will fight with Acto. Such news causes only silence in the room, and the guys are trying to realize what is happening. After a few seconds, Karoth immediately asks if they are going to attack them from here, and Biluc clarifies if it is dangerous. To this, the hero replies that he is aware of this risk, but then adds that Kororo's parents are in captivity, and the situation can change quickly. Then the girl is surprised that the hero is ready to risk the village for the sake of her people, and asks him again. Diluc answers her that sooner or later the collision would have happened anyway. He says that if they don't stop Acto now, then he will repay in kind. Then the hero clenches his hand into a fist again, holding it on the table, and is about to add something. He frowns heavily and firmly says that he will not forgive those who harm the inhabitants of Tenma. The hero raises his fist to the level of his face, and informs that his duty is to protect all the villagers and therefore promises not to let him hurt them again. The guys react to this in different ways. The bear is very surprised by this, Dodoria smiles, and the dwarf becomes more confident in the hero. Karoth is in favor of this idea since the head of the village said so. The other girls don't have time to answer anything yet, while Biluc just smiles and lowers his head as an agreement. Cindy replies that as a summoned spirit she will definitely help, but not only for this reason. She says that Diluc always defended Tenma, remembering his battles. Then the girl adds that she is a witness to this. From this, Cindy concludes that this is why they are doing well this time. In response to the hero, he is pleasantly surprised and smiling calls her name. Then Dodoria offers to act, and the bear promises to help in the same way as Diluc helped them once, after which the dwarf supports them. Suddenly, the hero hears the voice of Hakuro, who asks not to forget about him, and he thanks him. Then he casts his gaze at Kororo and addresses her, saying that they have decided everything. This makes her eyes widen in surprise. But a second later, her face changes, and a confident smile appears on it. The girl agrees with the hero and promises in this case to join them too. Then Diluc expresses great gratitude to everyone and now suggests developing a strategy. Dodoria folds her arms over her chest and asks what they should do since they can't just attack. To this, the hero replies that invading the territory from here is fraught with high risk, and therefore he would like to avoid this. Kororo then adds that the problem here is that the residents of Roses did not cross the border. She says that initially their village was located between the territories of Tenma and Roses, and the initiator of the arson was the latter. Then Dodoria becomes enraged and says that the village on Tenma's territory was also burned down, and assumes that the residents of Roses will most likely claim that a natural fire is to blame. The main character thinks about the fact that they tried not to invade the territory of Roses and assumes that Acto does not know exactly about the border and territories, after which he wonders, who told him? Then Balak suggests that they could attack from the other side, but Diluc says that their enemies think the same way. However, suddenly his gaze changes a lot, and a brilliant idea suddenly comes to mind. The hero understands that it would be nice to have a good reason. Upon hearing this, Kororo is surprised. Then he turns to the guys and informs them that everyone's strength will be needed in this regard. No one objected to him, as everyone agreed. From that moment on, the story is transferred to the Forest of the White Wolf to the border territories. Diluc sits down to inspect the ground when suddenly he is called out. Karoth informs him that they are done with the preparation, and the hero says that they are well done. She then adds that all the animals nearby have gone further away, and Cindy calls Karoth's skill amazing. Then Diluc turns to Hacker flying in the sky and asks him how the situation in the forest is, and he replies that there is no one nearby and that they can start at any moment. Having taken this into account, the hero gets to his feet and appears in front of a lot of trees. Suddenly, he pulls out his sword and holds it out in front of him, exhaling heavily. The hero then uses the release of magical power, after which his bracelet is activated. At the same moment, a spiral-shaped fire appears around his sword. Seeing this, Cindy is surprised at how much accumulated magic is in the bracelet. Then Diluc makes a big swing, after which he releases all the fire magic forward. All the trees in front of him immediately burn down, and thus a straight path appears. The fire sweeps very far and burns everything in its path. When the hero finishes his machinations, Cindy starts screaming that they now have a way. He turns to her and says that he will continue to rely on her, and she promises that she will not let him down. Then the girl stretches her arms out in front of her and uses an alchemical transformation, after which something similar to a pentagram appears in her hands. Diluc puts the sword in front of him again and concludes that everything is fine and going according to plan. However, suddenly he hears footsteps. The hero asks what kind of sound it was and assumes that it is an enemy. After that, people come out of the forest, and Diluc, frowning, realizes that they have come after all. 2 soldiers of Roses appear before him. One of them turns to the hero and asks what he is doing on their territory, and the other says that he will have a bad end if he decides to attack them. The soldiers point their spears at Diluc and, asking who he is, order him to give his name. Then he introduces himself with a smile as Diluc Rabilo, the lord of the village called Tenma. Upon hearing this, the soldiers are shocked and ask him again. They then conclude that the lord himself attacked them and tell them to prepare for revenge. One of them starts to advance and makes a dash. He then extends his spear forward to strike. However, Diluc blocks it with a light movement, putting it under the sharp part of the spear. He confidently says that the soldier is talking some nonsense and is watching his reaction. Upon hearing this, he clearly starts to get nervous, and then the hero adds that they will face his revenge. Then the attacking soldier retreats, and his comrade does not even dare to attack. Suddenly he notices that there is fresh earth under his feet and is greatly surprised by this. Then the soldier raises his head, hearing a voice that confirms his guesses. Cindy adds that this road was just created for Tenma. The soldier who attacked the hero becomes enraged and asks again what the girl said. Suddenly, he is informed that the right way to the territory lies behind the trees standing behind, forcing him to look back. Cindy says that they disguised the real border using fallen trees and grass. Thus, the soldiers, without knowing it, suddenly crossed the border and found themselves in the territories of Tenma. Cindy explains this to them. She then explains that, simply put, the soldiers broke into foreign territories, thereby shocking them. Seeing this, the girl smiles contentedly and frowns. Not knowing what to say, the soldiers just stay put and continue to remain silent. One of them realizes that he did not notice it in the dark and begins to get angry at himself. However, then an idea comes to his mind. He tells the guys that reinforcements will arrive soon at the sound, and that there is nothing to be done about it. After that, voices begin to come from the bushes. which find out where the noise came from. After a while, reinforcements come out of the bushes, and then the soldier says that there are more Rose's people, from which he concludes that the hero and his friends have already lost. But Diluc is not a bit scared and instead calls out to Carrot. Hearing her name, the girl adjusts the bow on her head and informs that she understood everything. Then she takes out a large hammer and hits it on the ground, causing sparks to appear around. After that, the girl picks him up and says that it's very good when everything goes according to plan. She hits the ground with her hammer again and jumps up for a stronger blow. A second later, traps appear under the soldiers' feet. After another moment, they immediately close, causing them to scream. The soldiers are trying to figure out what is happening, and feeling terrible pain, they are trying to break the trap. Despite this, Karoth reports that it is not fatal. Suddenly, Cindy, standing behind her, turns to her, saying that it was cool, but she assures the girl that she does not need praise. Then they are interrupted by the hero. He thanks Karoth for her help and now asks the girls to return to Tenma. After that, he turns to Kororo, and she says that she came here just for that. She transforms into a cute dog and, looking at the girls, asks them to climb on her back. Cindy admires what is happening, and Karoth notices that she can even transform. Then they sit on Kororo's back, and she asks them to hold on tight before making a dash. The hero turns to her and asks them to protect the village, to which the girl agrees. After that, she leaves the battlefield. However, Cindy is still worried about Diluc, looking at how he gradually disappears behind the trees and bushes. But then she starts looking ahead and wishes him luck, promising to do her duty too. While the soldiers were in pain on the spot, the hero informs them that the traps created by Karoth will soon disappear and advises them to run if they want to. He then adds that he does not want senseless bloodshed, continuing to hold the sword in front of him. After a few seconds, the traps disappear and the soldiers decide to retreat. But one of them, holding a spear, still stays in place and asks the hero to attack, assuring him that he will not escape. Then Diluc squeezes the hilt of the sword even harder. After that, he makes a swing with it and uses the Rabilo style. He then creates a very powerful magic ray called the Moonship Slash. From such a strong blow, the soldiers are thrown in different directions, which causes them to start screaming. When the magic ray disappears, they begin to gradually come to their senses and crawl away. Seeing this, the hero frowns and concludes that it seems that there are fewer people willing, while a drop of sweat is dripping from his forehead. But the two soldiers who came first remain lying in place. One says that Diluc is too strong, and the other wonders where he got so much strength from. Suddenly, the hero raises his head and, looking at the sky, realizes that dusk has thickened. Then he realizes that the soldiers of the Night Watch can no longer move, and the escapees have most likely already called for reinforcements. Then he looks down at the floor and thinks that more trained fighters will come next. Diluc stretches out his sword arm in front of him, and noticing a tremor in his body, concludes that he has spent too much strength. However, suddenly he remembers something and reaches into the inside pocket of his jacket. The hero says that it is for such situations that he has food with him, which Alice has prepared. Suddenly, memories flash before his eyes of when she said that she was not very useful in battle and offered him her food, hoping that at least she would help him. Chewing on the food, Diluc begins to feel that his magic has been restored, for which he mentally expresses gratitude to Alice. Then he puts the sword in front of him again and thinks that now he cannot be afraid of another batch of soldiers, since he will definitely protect the dark, because that is his plan. The hero decides to take over the reinforcements with full confidence, which makes him frown heavily. But suddenly only one person comes out of the forest, who notices what kind of Diluc has power. When he comes out of the darkness, he turns out to be a tall man, vaguely actor-like with long black hair. With a malicious smile, he offers Diluc to fight with himself, making him wary. Standing in front of the man, the main character decides to ask who he is. However, in response to this, he asks to show what Diluc is capable of. The departing soldiers turn around and call him Mr. Daltrin, adding that the hero is clearly unable to cope with him. Looking intently at the man, Diluc assumes with full confidence that he is definitely a leader from the City of Roses. Daltrin remembers that his lord talked about him and said that he wanted to repay him for what he had done, calling it utter stupidity. Then Diluc notices that the man is not shy in his expressions when it comes to his master. But Daltrin begins to laugh when he hears that the hero called Acto a gentleman and says that even though he has money and land, he doesn't have enough brains. Then he adds that Acto does whatever he tells him and asks Diluc the question, why is this so? After that, the man pulls out his weapon and says that in order to continue living like this, he will give him a helping hand. Having said that, he starts waving his instrument. The hero realizes that this is Morgenstern and thinks that he needs to be more careful. He dodges the blow, but it's still straining notices that he has a good reaction. However, he then convinces him that it's not that simple. The man stretches out his hand and informs that Diluc has not yet seen him fight for real. Then he becomes alert and realizes that Daltrin has a skill. He then asks the hero if he hears anything, and calls it the sounds of his defeat. Diluc notices that the noise is coming from the forest, but for some reason he does not feel the thirst for murder, but something else. Suddenly, someone's paws first appear from the bushes, walking forward. Then the hero notices silhouettes that look like people with ears and sees spears in their hands. When they come out of the darkness completely, Diluc manages to make out scared beastmen with weapons in their hands. He is surprised that the warriors are beastmen and asks about it. In response, he smiles and tells them that it's time to serve their master, calling them unfit. These words make their bodies tremble even more violently. The hero even notices elves among them, and thinks that he is seeing exactly what Kororo was talking about. Then he remembers how she told him that there are many species living in roses, many of which are half-humans. She was very afraid that they would be brainwashed. Kororo admitted that she herself does not understand why all this is happening, but the hero answered her with his serious silence. Then Diluc realizes that the capital of the demi-humans has been invaded by people from the City of Roses. Then he notices how they are trying to resist the order. One of the half-humans starts shouting that he does not want to fight at all, but his body does not obey at all. The hero clarifies whether the man controls them with the help of a skill, and he confirms his guesses, adding that this skill is very rare. After that, Daltrin grabs one of the half-humans by the arm and pulls him towards her. He points to the special bracelets on him and says that they do not allow the fighters to resist his will, and at the same time depriving them of their own. The man once again points to the half-humans and calls them the hero's favorite people. But seeing how he remains standing in place with a serious look, he decides to ask if he can kill them. Diluc replies that Daltrin oppresses people for his own benefit, after which he notices that he is the same as Acto. Seeing how this did not please the man, the hero adds that he cannot forgive those who treat their people like things and promises to defeat them like the Lord of Tenma. Then the man throws the half-man aside and tells Diluc that he can speak out as he wants. After that, he orders his fighters to join the battle, surround the hero and attack him, again calling them unfit. But Diluc reports that he knows not only fencing. Then he stretches out his hand, near which a familiar thing appears. The hero uses the alchemical transformation and thinks that since he is in the forest, he will have enough material. Daltrin sees that Diluc used a skill to bind one of the demi-humans and begins to get angry. However, then he glances at the other warriors. Then he realizes that the hero will not be able to cope with so many and simply will not have time to connect everyone. Then Daltrin notices that he is already at the limit and cannot attack, looking at how the hero is barely holding on. Realizing this, the man begins to laugh plaintively. Then he orders the half-humans to start firing, and the archers pull the bowstring with an arrow at once. A second later, arrows begin to fly at the hero from all sides, which he was clearly ready for. He frowns heavily and uses the Rabilo style. Then Diluc makes a swing with his sword and makes a cut of the moon shadow. After that, the arrows fly back and some of them fall at Daltrin's feet. He sees that the hero used an attacking technique to defend himself and is surprised, but then warns him that this is not all. Then the warriors pull the bowstring again, but Diluc answers him, saying that it is useless and stretches out his hand forward. Then he applies the alchemical transformation, after which a high hill appears between him and the fighters. The man sees that the hero has made an earthen wall and is furious about it. Then he notices that he is now attacking from a blind spot. Daltrin, gritting his teeth, expresses himself and tries to urgently come up with what can be done. Suddenly, an idea comes to his head, and he tells the hero that he was joking. Diluc doesn't understand what he means at first, but he strains anyway. At the same moment, the man rushes to the head of the demi-humans and pulls him to himself. Then Diluc stops and realizes what he is up to. Daltrin stands behind the head and forces him to cover himself with his body. The half-man's face was so exhausted that it seemed like he was already ready to die. Diluc is very scared for the life of the head and asks the man not to do this, but he starts laughing and asking if he can't be attacked. Then Daltrin notices that even such an old man can be used by calling him names and laughing. Upon hearing this, the hero becomes enraged and clenches his teeth. Other half-humans who were tied up by the hero begin to shout that it is dangerous and call the old man the head. Diluc hears this and takes note. But then he concludes that since he is called the head, this half-man is Kororo's father. The man realizes that they know each other and calls it luck. Then he tells Diluc not to move if he does not want the head to suffer, which is why he expresses himself, realizing what he is in for. Daltrin then turns to his warriors and orders them to head for Tenma, saying that the time has come. The hero shudders at such news. After that, the man allows him to go after them, as he assumes that he does not want Tenma to be destroyed. The hero realizes that he can send Hakura, but another thought comes to him. Suddenly, Daltrin starts laughing and says that he can leave the old man and return to Tenma, calling him Diluc Rabilo. He then adds that the hero cannot save everyone and reveals his weakness in that he cannot abandon anyone. However, after that, Diluc smiles and informs the man that he has not lost yet. Daltrin does not attach much importance to his words and says that he only knows how to scratch his tongue. Then Diluc says that he knew that Tenma would be attacked and explains that his task is to stop the man, and he asks him again. The hero then adds that Tenma will be protected by Cindy, Karoth, Balak, and Dodoria, who recently left. He imagines how his friends will be armed and with what dedication they will fight, saying that his comrades are strong. After that, the hero adds with full confidence that he believes in them with all his soul. But Daltrin just tusk in response to this. Suddenly, the head begins to gradually come to his senses. At first, he keeps his eyes closed, constantly repeating his daughter's name, but then he closes them anyway. As soon as he notices the hero in front of him, he immediately asks if his daughter is okay, gently extending his hand to him. Diluc answers him that Kororo is safe, and tells him about the promise to return all her loved ones that he gave her. The head's gaze suddenly changes, and he clenches his hand into a fist, clutching it to him in disbelief. Daltrin comes up to him from behind and says that he acted very presumptuously. Then he adds that these people will be his shield until they die and begins to act on the head's brain with magic. He begins to scream in pain and his bracelet digs into his skin again, starting to control his body again. The hero notices this when suddenly a thought comes to his head. Looking at how the head is being held hostage again, he understands something. Then Diluc decides to say that he will definitely save him so that he can live happily with Kororo. Then he begins to look the head in the eye and asks, based on this, to trust him. Upon hearing this, the half-man opens his eyes again and begins to believe the hero. This makes the bracelet stop working on him again. Then Diluc swings his sword and is about to attack the man. Daltrin is very surprised by this and concludes that the hero has decided to leave his people after all, while fear begins to be read in his eyes. After that, Diluc begins to approach Doltrina with a loaded sword. A magical aura has formed around him, and he continues to move. At this time, the head remembers the words of the hero that he wants them to live happily together with Kororo, and how the hero asked him to trust him and decides to do so. Then the head stretches out his hand and uses his powers. His hand begins to turn into the paw of a beast and increase in size. In the end, the bracelet does not stand up to this and collapses into many parts. As a result, the head turns into a big dog and runs away from Daltrin until he realizes how he managed to destroy the bracelet. Then the man asks the hero how he still has the strength and gets furious about it. In response to this, a confident smile appears on the hero's face. Then he rushes to Daltrin and stabs him while the head runs up to his relatives. When he reaches them, he immediately falls to the ground, thereby scaring them very much. The half-humans begin to call out to the head and rush around him. He then transforms back into a human and tries to recover while the others ask about his condition. However, one of them asks another question looking towards the hero, why did the bracelet break? Daltrin smiles and admits that he did not expect the head to remove his soul control. Then he realizes that now his opponents know about his skill and pulls out his weapon again. But the hero notices that the man constantly protects his ring, and decides that it is his weakness. Diluc thinks about the fact that through the ring he controls the hearts of people who have a bracelet on them and strengthens control over them. Then it turns out that a man's skill is to obey to strengthen control. The hero understands that if he removes control, then the strength of the bracelet will decrease. But he also realizes that he cannot do this to everyone. Then he decides that he needs to destroy Daltrin's ring and stands up with a sword. He picks up the Morgenstern from the ground and starts laughing, saying that he warned that the battle with him would not be easy. After that, he abruptly raises the heavy part of the weapon and makes a swing. The hero understands that Daltrin has a lot of magic, since he is able to control so many people. Then he decides that the man is much more dangerous than he expected and prepares for a fight. After that, Daltrin says that the fun is just beginning, addressing the hero and calling him by his first and last name. At this time, the subordinate half-humans come to Tenma village feeling very guilty. Karoth is noticeably surprised by such a large number of people and begins to look at the situation a little differently. Cindy, standing next to Kororo, begins to seriously prepare for battle. Before starting to fight, Karoth looks at everyone and says that there are not a few half-humans here. The story moves to the territory of Tenma. The friends of the main character begin to fight with the half-humans who have come. Balak blocks the blow with his sword and says with a displeased face that there are more opponents than expected. At this time, the bear fights off another half-human and responds that these warriors are being controlled. Then Dodria dodges the attack and says that it is very difficult to fight, trying not to harm the opponent, after which he gives him a slap on the back of the head and apologizes. At the same time, the dwarf begins to examine the bracelet on the arm of one of the half-humans and informs everyone that these are magic bracelets. He then adds that he will try to destroy them while the fighters are unconscious. Diluc looks away and thinks that this skill is very strange and that its owner must be the same. The bear is again surprised by the number of half-humans and begins to worry about the hero, after which he asks the others if they think Diluc is okay. Diluc confidently replies that the hero is probably fine and you shouldn't worry about him. Then Dodoria turns to them and says that they will definitely protect the village that Diluc entrusted to them. Then the bear pulls himself together and agrees with him. Meanwhile, the girls are fighting in the mountainous area of Tenma. Cindy uses an alchemical transformation. After that, the half-humans bind the roots of the plants. She reports that she was able to immobilize the opponents and Karoth praises her. Then she adds that they shouldn't let their guard down anyway, and the other agrees with her. Suddenly, Cindy notices that there are more and more half-humans coming from the forest. A second later, Kororo runs up to them and says that there are many beastmen among them, but something is wrong with them. Cindy assumes that they are under control as she feels the magic from the bracelets. Then she thinks that if they destroy these bracelets, they might be able to free the demi-humans. Then Karoth joins the dialogue and says that it will be difficult to destroy them one by one, blocking the blow with his weapon. But suddenly Cindy uses her powers and says that this is not necessary, since the owner of the skill is now fighting with the hero. Therefore, she concludes that it is necessary to choose the time before Diluc overcomes him. Upon hearing this, Karoth turns around and agrees with her. Then Cindy says she can hold off a few warriors, and her friend says her traps won't catch everyone either. After that, Karoth sighs, thinking that everything would be better if they only had more time. Kororo then addresses them. She says she will deal with the containment of the warriors and asks the girls to prepare their skills. Karoth raises the hammer over his head and thanks her, promising not to let the plan fail. Then Cindy uses the alchemical transformation and replies that she won't allow it either. Then they synchronously make a promise that they will fight with all their might until Diluc wins. At this time in the border areas, Daltrin once again asks the hero if he wants to give up. Then he swings his weapon and strikes, saying that Tenma will become theirs anyway. Morgenstern hits the trees and immediately cuts them down. The hero manages to dodge the blow and is surprised at how far Daltrin's weapon reaches. After that, Diluc uses magic, jumps up, and is about to strike the man from above. However, his attack narrowly misses the bound demi-humans, making them very scared. The hero notices this and realizes that if he is careless, he will hurt innocent people. Then an idea comes to his mind, which makes his gaze quickly change and become more angry. Daltrin tells the hero that by constantly dodging, he will not win and swings again. The same one does not answer anything, trying to guess the moment. Then Diluc decides that it is necessary to knock the Morgenstern out of his hands and puts the sword in front of him. He makes a dash towards the man, thereby shortening the distance. But Daltrin pushes him away with his foot, grinning at the same time. He puts his foot against Diluc's sword, which causes him to fall into a stupor, get angry, and cluck. Then the man offends the hero, saying that he is noticeably weak and pushes off. After that, he makes a swing, and the heavy part of the weapon is behind the hero. However, he jumps up to dodge the blow and jumps back along the way. Daltrin becomes enraged and mentally asks the hero a question. Does he really think he can win without injuring or killing anyone? Then he concludes that Diluc will not go to any lengths in order to achieve something. Then the man decides to end it, while fear began to be read in his eyes. After that, he swings and throws the heavy part of his weapon towards the bound demi-humans. Seeing this, Diluc immediately rushes to them, shouting at the man not to touch them. Then he flies up to the half-humans at great speed and protects them with a sword. With his weapon, the hero blocks the blow and tells Daltrin that he only knows how to use pathetic tricks. Diluc makes a confident face and admits that his fighting style is a little weak, as he said. But then he reminds me that he has friends who are ready to help him. The man, who does not understand anything, asks him again. After that, he tries to return the heavy part of the weapon back to himself. Suddenly, the hero uses the summoning. After that, a window opens next to it, in which there is a description of this skill and a scale of points showing that they have reached the maximum. Diluc is pleased with the news that he has finally accumulated enough points, after which he thinks that he trusts his strength. Then the hero remembers the moment when a bear approached him and asked if he was really going to fight alone, in response to which he called his name. Then Dodoria joins the dialogue and tells the bear not to worry and reminds him that Diluc can always summon Hakura. But then the hero reports that he is not going to summon a dragon near the border, and friends are interested in the reason for this. He then explains that summoning Hakiryu consumes magical energy that he would like to save, after which he adds that he needs the dragon to help him after the battle. Then Dodoria also realizes that Diluc is really going to fight alone, admitting that now he is just as worried. But to reassure his friends, the hero opens a window and informs them that he has a safety net. It was written in the window that the owner was able to summon creatures from the past and use their powers, and the points scale showed 820 out of 1,000. The hero says that he accumulated more points while they were developing a plan. Then he adds that he will quickly gain points for the summoning itself and summon a new spirit. However, Dodoria notices that the hero himself does not know which spirit he will summon while he is doing something in the window. Then Diluc raises his head up, looking at the sky, and thinks about the fact that he already has one candidate, after which he remembers what Henkyou said. When the dragon told him that the militant spirit would respond to his call as soon as it received the scent of battle. Then the hero stretches out his hand in front of him and addresses the ancient spirit, asking him to go through time and appear. Then an unusual aura begins to form around him, and he uses the summoning of the ancients. At the same moment, a tiger-like spirit appears on the battlefield and begins to growl angrily. After that, he is glad that his turn has finally come, as he has been waiting for this for a very long time. The tiger makes a dash, pushing off with its hind legs from the ground. At the same moment, he appears in front of the hero and covers him with his body to protect him. Seeing Daltrin in front of him, the tiger changes his gaze and makes him more aggressive. The man is very surprised by his appearance and becomes furious, realizing that his defeat is near. At this point, Diluc decides to open a window and look at information about the spirit he has called. There he sees that the spirit is called the Furious King of Beasts, who has 1 level out of 5. The description said that the owner receives the incredible power of the legendary beast, the red tiger. The hero realizes that the legendary beast is now standing in front of him, when suddenly he points to the man and asks if he needs to be defeated, calling him a bro. Diluc replies with a smile and apologizes for asking for help. Then the tiger agrees to help him and allows the hero to climb on his back, which he does. The man says that the hero has called another friend and makes a swing with his weapon. However, this does not stop the tiger. Sitting on the tiger's back and holding on tightly to him, the hero realizes that he is very fast. At this time, Daltrin swings his weapon at them. The man is sure that they will not be able to keep up with his attacks, but the tiger easily grabs his weapon by the chain, stopping him. Then, with his paw, he presses on the heavy part of the Morgenstern and presses it into the ground. Under the influence of his weight, the weapon breaks, and then the tiger spits it out and tells Daltrin not to interfere. After that, he throws the hero up with one push, while somehow he was already ready to attack. Diluc flies high up and starts flying at the man, holding a loaded sword in his hands. He says that now is the moment for reckoning and calls the man by name. After these words, the hero uses the timid style. He then stabs Daltrin using the moon shadow cut, thereby causing him to scream. In the process, the man manages to cough and lose consciousness. He just falls to the ground right in front of the hero. He notices that the man is starting to come to his senses and decides not to let him die. He uses an alchemical transformation. After that, Daltrin is wrapped around the roots of plants, preventing his blood from spilling out further. Suddenly, a tiger approaches the hero and notices that he is very kind since he stopped the bleeding of the enemy. But he replies that Daltrin must face real punishment and decides to destroy his ring just in case. After these words, the roots of the plants make their way to the ring and destroy the stone inserted in it. This makes Daltrin start shaking, and he clenches this hand into a fist. Then he lowers his head and starts screaming that his plan has failed. Then he informs the hero that the heir of eternal darkness will be reborn through his fault, but he does not understand what he is talking about. Tiger calls this nonsense and asks Diluc not to listen to Daltrin, which is why he remembers that he needs to focus on what is urgent. Then the main character raises his head up and thinks about how the rest of his friends are now. After that, the story is transferred to the territory of Tenma. In the midst of the battle, Cindy suddenly notices something strange and asks her friends to stop. The demi-humans suddenly notice that they have finally gained control of their body. Then they begin to rejoice at this and shout that now they are free again. Upon hearing this, Karoth turns to Cindy, and they both conclude that the main character has won after all. Cindy mentally tells Diluc that he is a wonderful person, chosen by the skill itself. She then adds that the call of the ancients only goes to those who deserve to be king. Cindy folds her arms over her chest and remembers that on that day they became spirits and waited 4,000 years. She says that they were waiting for someone who would have this skill. Then the girl adds that it was the main character who breathed life into her again, remembering the happiness when they created things together. However, Cindy disappeared from the ancient darkness and from people's memories. But despite this, she believes that the hero has the qualities of a real king, necessary in order to return Tenma to its former glory. Then she decides to make every effort to achieve Diluc's goal, after which she goes to free the demi-humans. But suddenly Karoth hears a strange rustle which makes him wary. Then she decides to tell Cindy about it. The girl tells her that something strange is happening in the forest when suddenly she hears a familiar voice.